Good afternoon. I'm Charlotte Roman, Chair of the Big Cypress Basin Board, and I'd like to call the November 18th, 2020 meeting to order. If the staff could please go ahead and unmute themselves and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
to
the flag
of the United
of the United
States
States of America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
which stands
stands
one
one
nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice.
justice for all.
Thank you. If the staff could please remute yourself. A couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we really appreciate everyone joining us for the public meeting via Zoom. I miss seeing faces in the audience, but I'm thankful we have this platform to continue discussing important basin matters. Members of the public who wish to speak may use the raise the hand feature on Zoom. If members of the public are having trouble or need help, please go to our website, sfwmd.gov, and click the orange Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you are using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. Lisa, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
Madam Chair, we have no changes to our agenda today.
Thank you. We'll go ahead to our first general public comment section. I'd like to ask the public that if you would like to speak, you may use the raise the hand feature in Zoom. If you are using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand or *6 to mute and unmute yourself. The 3-minute comment guideline will apply, and you'll see a timer on your screen. And I'd appreciate it, and we'd appreciate it if you would follow the guideline. Yvette, do we have names of members of the public who would like to speak?
Madam Chair, I'd like to give a few minutes, if it's okay with you, for those who'd like to speak to raise their hand.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I see no hands raised.
Okay, then we'll go to our first agenda item, the Picayune Strand Restoration Project update. We will take comments after each section of this presentation. And our first presenter is Jennifer Leeds, who will provide the construction update. Ms. Leeds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to get my laser pointer going. Thank you. So this afternoon, I would like to give an update on the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. This is one of our projects that's part of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. This project is about 80% complete, and I'm going to give an update on some of the remaining features that we have to construct, which is the Southwest Protection Feature and the plugging of the Faka Union Canal. So first, just to remind everyone where we're talking about here in Southwest Florida is the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. And it's the area that you see on your screen that is in hatched red. This is approximately 55,000 acres that we are restoring to natural habitat with sheet flow, so it's hydrologic restoration. To the right of the project, we have the Fakahatchee Strand. To the left is the Belle Meade area. And to the south, this is US 41. To the north of the project, we have I-75. And the water will generally flow from the north to the south in this project under Tamiami Trail or US 41 and into either Collier Seminole State Park and also the 10,000 Islands area. Okay, there we go. All right, the primary purpose for the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, as I mentioned before, it's hydrologic restoration. On the left, you see a map You can see these canals that were here, the Prairie Canal and the Merritt Canal, the Faka Union Canal, and also the Miller Canal. And then all these other lines that you see are old roads and tram roads. And so the purpose of the project was to backfill these canals and remove the road to restore the pre-drainage water flow to this area. So we want to restore it from water just flowing through the canals to sheet flow from the north to south and all the way down under US 41 into the downstream area. By doing so, this will restore both the wetland and the upland habitats within this watershed and increase groundwater levels. And it will also restore the habitat for many threatened and endangered species. Just through some of the work that has been done to date over in this area on the eastern side of the project, we've seen many Florida panther return, and the Florida black bear are some of the species that we've seen return to this area. In addition, this will also provide some better fire management with this hydrologic restoration. So what's included in this? Again, here's a map on the right, which shows the Picayune Strand project itself. And so the project features included 3 pump stations, which is the Merritt pump station up here, the Faka Union pump station, and then over off to the west, the Miller pump station. Overall, it included plugging approximately 42 miles of canals, removing over 285 miles of roads, removing 62 miles of tram roads. It included a feature down here in the southwest, what we call the Southwest Protection Feature, which is a levee. And this is to provide flood protection for the urban and agricultural areas to the west of the project. And also we have a manatee mitigation feature that was built down around this area here. 2 things I'd like to just kind of really quickly go over is what we define as the project boundary. So the project boundary of Picayune Strand is this entire area from I-75 and everything that you see outlined in these colors down to US 41. That's the entire project boundary. Now, what we call what we define as the construction footprint is those areas in which we are backfilling canals and removing roads. And those are what we are deemed as our construction footprints. So where are we at today currently? As of today, we have plugged 75% of the roads, 93% of, or I'm sorry, we have taken out 75% of the roads, 93% of the logging trams have been degraded. All 3 pump stations are complete. Both the Prairie and the Merritt Canal has been plugged. The manatee mitigation feature down here to the south is complete. But we do have just a few project features that still need to be constructed. One is the Southwest Protection Feature here. Again, this is to provide flood protection for the urban and agricultural areas. And the reason why this is needed is as these canals are plugged and these roads removed and we restore sheet flow, instead of water flowing straight through these canals, it will then sheet flow over the landscape, which will put more water over onto the western side of the project. And this Southwest Protection Feature is to mitigate for those potential offsite flooding impacts. In addition, the remaining work will be to plug the Faka Union and the Miller canals. We also have some further work that's going to be done on the vegetation and exotic control, and Ellen Allen will be giving you that in an update when my presentation is complete. Okay, so getting into the contracts. So because this is a comprehensive Everglades restoration plan project and is part of our 50-50 cost share with the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers actually has the lead on constructing these remaining features. And they have recently rewarded all the remaining contracts to complete this work. So again, here's our feature for the Southwest Protection Feature. That contract was just awarded on September 25th. They also have awarded a contract to put some additional culverts under US 41 and also in County Road 92. And these were required to help distribute the flow There are current culverts there, but there needed to be some new ones added. So this contract was awarded on September 28th. And then another contract was awarded on September 24th to clean out some of the spoil still along the Faka Union Canal. And the reason why that is important is to remove some of the vegetation out of that spoil so it can then be used to backfill the remaining portions of the Faka Union Canal. All this work right now is targeted to be complete in October of 2024. The last feature that I wanted to go over, and that was those were the construction contracts. But we realized that by some of the work that we have done to date, which, like I said, 80% of the construction work has been done, but we've only been able to get about 20% of the hydrologic benefits. We did some modeling to show if we plugged some of the upper 3 miles in the Faka Union Canal, could we achieve some additional hydrologic restoration benefits? And showed that we could. So the Corps is going to be moving out and looking at plugging some of those upper 3 miles starting in January of 2021, including removal of one of the weirs. And they anticipate that that work will be complete in October of 2021. And that will help to provide some of the early hydrologic restoration benefits. And in addition, once that is done and once the Southwest protection feature is complete, they will also work then to finish off the bottom half of the Faka Union and Miller Canal. And again, all that work is supposed to be complete by October of 2024. And here we have that map that shows exactly where we're talking about. So here is the upper 3 miles for the Faka Union Canal plugging. And this is where we're going to do that work starting in January and where we should get some of those early restoration benefits. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. And again, all this work will be done in October of 2024.
Thank you very much, Jen, for that update. I have a couple of questions, probably just for clarification. Is the funding all intact in terms of this project? Has all of the funding been received and we know that it's going to be done in 2024?
Yes, so this is in the remaining features are being funded by the Corps, and so those contracts have been awarded. They have the funding. The remaining work is fully funded by the Corps, and the upper plugging is being done by their own construction engineers.
Thank you. I want to thank the Corps of Engineers and especially Akin Owasana on our staff at the district for doing the modeling and working together to identify that upper 3 miles of canals that could be plugged so that we start getting some hydrologic benefits or some additional hydrologic benefits from this project. I think that was one of the first things that I had asked the Corps about soon after becoming the chair of the Big Cypress Basin board. And I really appreciate that teamwork and moving that forward beginning next year. Let's go ahead and see if the public has any questions on this. Yvette, is there any public comments for this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Robert Wiley, followed by Andrew Tyler.
Great.
Mr. Wiley, can you please unmute?
I think I am now unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, the question I have and the concern is Collier County is in the process of still working with FEMA on updating our flood insurance rate map. So one of the things we've had to do with them in the process is to let them know that along the Merritt Canal, those canals are plugged and the pump station is fully operational. However, we have not notified them that anything is going to be taking place in the Faka Union or the Miller canals. So now with the information that you're providing, that you're going to basically start plugging the Faka Union Canal, whether it's first 3 miles or full length of it, doesn't matter. We have to know that pump station is fully operational. So can you guys send me some information on your schedule so we can put that into our modeling? And I'm sure FEMA will have some questions about it. So any information you can send me as to what you're doing. I think we have pretty much the operational schedule for the pump station as far as on and off elevations, but that's the kind of stuff we're going to need the documentation to submit to them via electronic copy would be great. But we just need that information. If you can get that to me within the next, by the time you start plugging in January, we're going to need it by then.
Sir, this is the chair speaking. I don't see any reason why you couldn't have that information. Please, I'll have Lisa Keeler, the Basin Administrator, coordinate with you and the district staff to make sure that you get that.
That will be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Yvette.
Yes, the next speaker is Mr. Tyler. Mr.
Hello,
Tyler,
can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. My question goes to the Lippman
no.
Farms berm and road that's being built there. And I wonder if you have any update on the potential mitigation for the agricultural runoff.
Mr. Taylor, I didn't quite catch your question.
I'm sorry, let me try again.
Thank you.
My question goes to the berm and road at Lippman Farms, the feature that Ms. Leeds described. My question goes to the runoff that comes off the agricultural properties, and what sort of mitigation will there be, and is there any update on that? Thank you.
I believe you're speaking about the Southwest Protection Feature.
Yes.
And the new conveyance that's going to be addressed there or constructed there.
Yes.
We do have an update coming up on the next item on the agenda on the Watershed Water Quality Feasibility Study. Could that be what you're referring to?
Yeah, why don't we go to that when you're ready, of course, and perhaps I can raise my hand again then if I'm still seeking more.
Okay, that
Thank
would
you.
be great. Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair, the next speaker is Ms. Meredith Budd, followed by Mr. Mike Elfenbein.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Hi there. Yes, Meredith Budd on behalf of the Florida Wildlife Federation. I had a clarifying question if it was possible for timing to get answered. The Southwest Protection Feature, it seemed, if I read the slide correctly, said that it would be anticipated a completion for October of 2024. And then the plugging of the lower half of the canals would then commence after that completion of the project. So is there a different completion date for the total for plugging is there an anticipated completion date rather for the plugging of the bottom half of the canals post the completion of the Southwest Protection Feature, or is that October 2024 date inclusive of the plugging of the southern portion of the canals?
Jen Leeds, would you like to answer that, please?
Yes, yeah, thank you for asking that clarifying question. Yeah, so all features in the project itself should be complete by October of 2024. So they'll line the timing up so everything matches.
Understood. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
Mr. Mike Elfenbein. Please unmute. Mr. Elfenbein, you're still muted. Mr.
There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Happy hump day, everybody. Hi, Yvette. Hello, Jennifer, everybody. Great job. Awesome presentation. I have a question. As you guys are very well aware, especially you, Jennifer, in our conversations about WERP, I have concerns. Many people have concerns about the ecological impacts of putting additional water on the landscape. And despite the best interests and efforts of all of these projects, as we see currently in the conservation areas and throughout the system, sometimes a lot of this is out of our control. So I know when the Picayune project started some 20 years ago, there was a baseline study conducted on wildlife populations in the Picayune. And I believe that at some point in time, that study was supposed to provide some incremental data to show us what the changes were doing to those populations. And I'm not sure if that started or not, but my ultimate concerns is we're about to change terrestrial habitat throughout 2/3 of the Picayune into aquatic habitat. And I just wonder what those impacts might be on terrestrial species, threatened, endangered, and not. Can you shed some light on that, please?
Jen Leeds, would you like to address his question, please?
Certainly. Hi, Mike. Hope you're doing well. So as you know, with most or with all of our CERT projects, we also consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they give us a biological opinion, and that which covers the threatened and endangered species. So, so that has been addressed within the planning project, recognizing that this area, before it had canals and roads, was that mix of both upland and wetland habitat. By putting the roads and the canals in, it became strictly upland, over-drained. And so really what we're doing is kind of looking to restore it to that precondition that we saw before those roads and those canals came in. So the intent of that is to get it back to what it was before. And again, it's done within consultation of not only with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but also with the state's Florida Wildlife Commission as well, to look at all those terrestrial species and the aquatic species, and to see how they are going to be restored. And in addition to that, there are monitoring plans to take a look at how these species and these habitats are coming back and how successful it's been.
So, and has that monitoring already began past the initial baseline? So has there been any 5 or 10 year benchmarks in the last 20 years?
I don't know about 5 or 10 year benchmarks, but yes, the work currently is ongoing. As we've been restoring areas, we've been implementing the monitoring incrementally to match that.
Awesome. Thank you. I look forward to seeing that. Maybe I'll follow up with you later this week.
Okay, you bet.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have no additional hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead then and move to the second part of our presentation on the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. And the second presenter on this will be Ellen, who will present the Exotic Vegetation Management Plan. Ellen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to update you today on the vegetation management at Picayune Strand. Okay. Today I'm going to discuss the nuisance and invasive plants at Picayune. Unlike Jennifer's presentation that focused on construction, I'll be focusing on the vegetation management efforts exclusively, including a discussion of the current state of the forest vegetation challenges, strategic planning efforts, past accomplishments, and the progress we hope to make over the next 3 years. Historically, Picayune had a diverse, intact wetland ecosystems, which included hydric pine flatwoods, marshes, and cypress swamps. These ecosystems are maintained through fire and natural flooding. Construction of drainage associated with Golden Gate Estates disrupted those processes that naturally occurred in the region, driving the ecosystems to shift to an upland state. The ecosystem suffered from fragmentation, reduced hydro period, increased fire intensity, and colonization by upland species, some of which are non-native. These changes have resulted in a reduced biodiversity and loss of habitat for some threatened and endangered species due to the more upland condition of the site. Roy Rogers discussed with the general challenges caused by invasive species with you a couple of months ago. Many non-native invasive species occur at Picayune, but 2 are the most abundant, which are Kogan grass and Brazilian pepper. Native species can also be a problem and have become so at Picayune, the most notable being the sable palm. In addition to upland species, there are also other highly aggressive aquatic and wetland species that will be the habitat will be recreated for by the restoration. So as I mentioned, Brazilian pepper, this is the most highly invasive in the upland environment in Picayune. This is the most dominant native plant and has created about 14,000 acres of moderate to severe dense thickets, a quarter of which is in a quarter of the restoration area is covered by Brazilian pepper. And you can see that by the blue on the map where the lighter teal color is less dense areas. These dense thickets can shade out and dominate the understory and mid-story of the forest ecosystem, further disrupting habitat availability for wildlife. Many upland native plants become more common in Picayune, but the species with the largest strip is sable palm. So you can see an aerial view here. It's just solid cabbage palm with very little understory even visible. The drainage facilitated its encroachment across the landscape rather than the small niche it once inhabited. Sable palms remove the open condition and diverse understory, which is critical and common in panther habitat. Sable palms not only displace some species by their presence, but they also change the fire behavior, most notably the intensity of the fire and the ability to bring fire into the canopy. You can see on this side here, this black scorches all the way up the tree in an area that has cabbage palm. We remove cabbage palms from this side and you can see very little of any intense scorching on the pine, which that intense scorching can lead to crown fires and also create hazardous fire conditions. So this slide is a graph. This slide are the key points of our presentation. Plant response is highly species dependent and unique for each species. Upland species will decline at various rates across the landscape and wetland habitats. Hydrological restoration is expected to reduce the colonization of upland plants, but will not kill off many established individuals. Mature individuals of typically upland species can be tolerant of seasonal flooding and will persist in the foreseeable future without management. Wetland species will be able to expand from where they have been restricted to due to drainage if the habitat is free from upland invaders. Some invasive species of are wetland adapted and may currently have a limited distribution, but are expected to thrive in the restored hydrological condition. Most notably are Melaleuca and Lygodium, which we can keep in check through management. Finally, there are unknown invasive species that are currently not in the forest, but present a significant risk for establishment. They're rather known, but not known within the forest. So this graphic illustrates the last slide. So we have the pre-disturbance condition over here, which has very high habitat quality. Following the disturbance of the creation of the canals, we ended up with this lower diversity, upland species, invasive species, and a change in fire behavior. Following restoration, we can follow 2 paths. One with active vegetation management, which pushes us higher up on the habitat quality in a rather shorter period of time, or with no management, a longer window of time, and some of that undesirable vegetation will continue to exist and impact ecosystem processes. So we have developed plans to manage the nuisance vegetation in Picayune. During the construction phases and immediately following, we will conduct initial control efforts to construction areas, which is where the soil has been moved by heavy equipment and the like. These are ditches, previous roads, former trams, old home sites. And we will, anything that was done to bring the land back to natural grade. And the Army Corps has conducted some of these treatments. Following the transfer, we will move into the operations phase, which is a 50-50 cost share with the Corps. And we will manage vegetation in the construction footprints, but we will also move to treat invasive vegetation in the forested areas beyond. We will conduct these treatments by prioritizing the species that have a potential for the most risk, facilitated by a spatial approach within our budget. So we're going to be following a systematic approach, as we always do, and moving from east to west, following the hydrological restoration that Jennifer mentioned earlier. We've divided our work area into 4 phases. As you can see on the map, they're vertical phases, and we will work in each one based on the priorities and risk, and we will be skipping some species initially. Example is that we will aggressively treat Melaleuca since it is known to invade wetlands, but we may bypass another upland invader in lower areas since it isn't expected to thrive or expand. Along with this integrated management approach, we will maintain areas through retreatments to achieve maintenance control as needed before moving forward to additional areas. So, excuse me. Whenever possible, we want to focus on the construction footprints. These footprints are a highway for invasive species spread. And they are at most risk because of the ground clearing has removed all competition and any native seed bank. These treatments are critical since invasive species will take advantage of the cleared land. Prioritizing these areas, we will remove the source for invasion into the forested areas. So if you see in this map here, all of the roads, we will be focusing on those because they get invaded very quickly by very aggressive species. So this map shows the construction footprints and their current status. So in the easternmost section, these roads are in maintenance control because they have had several treatments. In phases 2 and 3, these have had initial treatments and are not yet in maintenance control. And all the way to the west, in phase 4, we have not conducted any treatments at this time. And there is still core construction going on the westernmost side. So this is the forested areas. So this is all the areas outside those areas that have had construction impacts. So we're talking about the wooded areas for this slide. So we have not had any treatments in the majority of the forest. We have had some initial treatments in this portion and this portion, and we are lucky enough to be in maintenance control in this sliver along the east side, which has made our neighbor very happy, I'm sure. So for fiscal year 21, as we move forward, we need to maintain all of these roads in the construction footprint and continue treatments over here in these roads to get to maintenance control. The blue polygons indicated are this area and this top area will be retreatments, and this lower portion of the forested area will be an initial treatment. In fiscal year 22, assuming that budget is allocated, we will continue forward. We will work in these construction footprints towards maintenance control, and we will do initial treatments in this westernmost portion of the road, previous roads. We will also move into initial treatments in the south end of phases 2 and 3 and a little bit in 1 that will help push us closer to that maintenance control goal. In fiscal year 23, our budget is also pending, but what we would do is do a retreatment of all the roads that are in maintenance control and continue to work on the western side to get those treatments closer to maintenance control. And then we would retreat all the wooded area, the forested area that we did in fiscal year 21, as well as the maintenance control area along the eastern side. And we do those retreatments because retreatments are considerably less costly than initial treatments, which if we don't follow up, we will get to that highly infested initial state rather quickly. So in summary of what we'll be doing in the next 3 years, you can see that we will be treating all the roads within the project area, and the vast majority of those areas will be in maintenance control, 81%, which will be really significant because we have then eliminated those highways for spread of invasive plants. In the non-constructed area, so the forested areas, we will be in maintenance control in only 14% of the area, but as you can see, the majority of the area will be in some level of treatment. And when you consider how many acres, this is really quite an accomplishment in such a short period of time. And we will still have a small area of about 37% that will still need initial treatments. As with all projects, we have some challenges to overcome. First is sufficient funding, so we don't lose the progress we have made in those areas that have achieved maintenance condition. The second is coordination with the Forest Service on prescribed fires so that those can occur without interference of our large-scale treatment efforts. Next, we recently solicited for ground contractors, increasing our contractor base. Although we have new firms, we are still in the process of working with them so that they understand the needs of the district and we can train them fully on our processes. Finally, we will not manage sable palms until a time when Brazilian pepper and grasses are under control, and we can proceed in a stepwise fashion so that we do not exacerbate the problem of other invasives. Key points I'd like to leave you with are that hydrologic restoration will not restore the vegetation communities within Picayune alone. We need to move forward with vegetation management to reach the restoration and permit goals in a timely manner. We will prioritize species treatment so that we get the most benefit from our efforts. We will progress across Picayune Strand in a strategic manner following the hydrological restoration. And lastly, long-term objectives can only be met with consistent funding and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for your excellent presentation. I have a couple of questions. When did vegetation management begin in the Picayune Strand restoration area?
Well, I would say between 15 to 20 years ago. I started at the district just over 15 years ago, and that effort was already underway in the Prairie Canal footprint area. So I would say 15 to 20 years ago range.
Is our goal to get some type of restoration of the plant communities completed before 2024 when the project is supposed to be completed?
Ideally, that would happen, but it is unlikely because some of the plants will persist even following hydrologic restoration without treatment. And since we're not even getting to that point of hydrologic restoration until 2024, we probably will not be able to get that benefit of decreased colonization. So invasives will continue to spread in those areas that are still hydrologically disturbed.
Mm-hmm. So they both need to work together, would you say?
Yes. What happens is a cabbage palm that's mature, you're not going to flood out or burn out. But once hydrology is restored, we would see a stop of recruitment of new individuals. So then we would only have to manage the ones that are in place.
And you highlighted the roads that you have to focus on. Is there an effort to plant native plant communities on those roads, or is that not a part of the vegetation management?
That's not a part of the current plan in place.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we have any questions from the public. Yvette, are there any public comments for this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Robert Wiley.
Okay,
Sorry
Mr.
if I am asking a question that may have been in your presentation. I had to step out for a few moments. But along the eastern side of the Picayune, where you had the Prairie and the Merritt canals, those have been plugged for a while. That was the area where you were showing a lot of Brazilian pepper infestation. So over the years that those have been plugged, what has been the success rate of getting the Brazilian pepper out of there now?
Ellen, would you like to go ahead and address this question?
So although those canals have been plugged, we haven't had full hydrologic restoration. So we have to consider that. Some of the funding over time, we've had initial efforts that were quite significant and then we pulled back a little bit. So at this point, we have had some success. I don't have a percentage I can give you on that off the top of my head, but we have had some success in those areas. And in some cases, Brazilian pepper will stay on the site long term because there is quite a bit of topography out there between different areas, just like sable palms will occur across the site long term as well, because there are niches and habitats where they will be sustained. So hydrology alone will not get rid of all Brazilian pepper in perpetuity.
Well, as a follow-up to that, does the district have any kind of a program that intends to go in there to try to eradicate the Brazilian pepper off, since that's one of the invasive species that can spread extremely rapidly, especially with birds?
So with that, we are planning when we go into the forested areas, as I indicated on the maps, we will be treating Brazilian pepper. We also use an integrated approach. So we're working with USDA on biocontrols as well to get those to the site for Brazilian pepper management as well. So we will definitely be treating them. They are Brazilian peppers and the exotic grasses are the #1 priorities for our invasive plant management.
Okay, thank you.
Bet, are there any?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's next is Mike Elfenbein. Sorry, I was double muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm struggling for a good signal here. Great presentation, but I have some concerns because all of this stuff, and it's great to think that you guys are putting together a plan that might work, but you're already behind the 8 ball. In the last 20 years, Picayune, as you've shown, a quarter of it is overwhelmed by exotic invasives. One issue that comes to mind to me is when the restoration project started, they cleared a pathway, almost the equivalent of a road, diagonally from northwest to southeast, starting at I-75, just east of Everglades Boulevard. And that runs all the way to almost Patterson and about what used to be 66th or 68th Street, essentially in between the eastern and central pump stations. And that path that was cleared went straight through Cypress strands and upland hammocks, and essentially created the mechanism to further spread Brazilian pepper throughout Picayune. The removal of roads, as you highlighted in your presentation, has created a vector for rapid spread of invasives. And at the same time, you guys or the management of this Picayune has dictated that we're going to let all those old roads grow up. And I've seen where forestry officials have been required to create fire breaks adjacent to the old roads simply because somebody thinks those old roads need not be there anymore. So while the fill has been removed from those old roads, I suggest that maybe leaving some of those strategically open and traversable to make management of the Picayune, not just for invasives, but for prescribed fire, essential. And then the other thing I'd like to bring to your attention, while we always discuss shortfalls in budgets and funding to address these things, and many of you have heard me say this before, you have an army of sportsmen with equipment buggies, airboats, chainsaws, knowledge, understanding of the terrain and the habitat, who are ready, willing, and able to provide you those services that you pay for at a premium today, at their expense, simply because they love the resource and want to be a part of its stewardship. Whereas it's been the usual MO of the government agencies to find ways to exclude those stakeholders and user groups, I encourage you to find ways to be more inclusive of them and incorporate them in your gaps in funding to achieve the goals that we all want to see you succeed at. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have no additional speakers.
Okay, if there's no additional public comments, we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Feasibility Study update. And that'll be with Jennifer Leeds. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's see if I can get my laser pointer back. Okay. Thank you. So we're going to keep with the Picayune theme. But this particular update is to talk about a feasibility study that we launched off back in July. And it covers what we call the Picayune Watershed, and it's a water quality feasibility study. So if everyone will just bear with me just a little bit, I want to give a little bit of background on how this came about, to provide some context on why we're doing it. So again, we're down here in the same area with the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, I-75 to the north, US 41 to the south. But as we define this, we are looking at what we call the Picayune Watershed itself. So it's not just the Picayune Restoration Project, but we're also looking at the Belmead area, and then we're also looking at the urban and agricultural areas off to the west. And all of this watershed area when the Picayune Strand Restoration Project is complete, and we'll go into this in the next slide, I'll show you some of the flows that we anticipate. All of this water now, as it currently travels under US 41 and County Road 92, we're putting in some additional culverts or conveyance features like we talked about in my presentation previously. And that is to help facilitate and distribute the sheet flow of water from the north of US 41 into the south of US 41. And the reason why that's important is this water, when it flows from the north of US 41 down into the south, it goes into Collier Seminole State Park and the 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge and further downstream. These areas have designations known as Outstanding Florida Waters, or OFWs is the acronym. So Outstanding Florida Waters, what that means is it provides some additional protections to protect the existing water quality. And it also provides protection because of the natural attributes of those areas. And let me get into the next slide, and I'll show you the restoration flows. But this circle area here is really kind of where we're focusing in at. And let me show you what I mean. So on the left, this is a map. Again, we have the Picayune Strand watershed. We have the agricultural area, and we have Belmead up here. This orange outline is the Southwest Protection Feature. And then again, this circle shows where there are existing culverts under US 41 and where the new ones are going to be in green under US 41 and County Road 92. And then the map on the right shows what we anticipate the water is going to be, how it's going to flow. So it's going to flow, this is the Southwest Protection Feature, and this is Picayune Strand Restoration Project here. This water is going to funnel down, and it's going to flow from north to south and under US 41 and into Collier Seminole State Park and under County Road 92, and then keep coming down into Collier Seminole State Park and in 10,000 Islands. It's also taking flow from the upstream areas from US 41, the north side of 41 here, which is urban areas, You'll have this area, this watershed flow coming through the farm and coming out here. Now, the reason why I'm kind of giving you some of this background context is as we were working with stakeholders on the project delivery team for the Southwest Protection Feature for the Corps to award this final contract, as the earlier gentleman made a comment or had a question about some of the flows coming out of these areas, not just the farms, but further upstream, what we call our upstream sources, and flowing down, there are elevated nutrient levels in that water quality. And by putting in these new culverts, we know we're having new distribution sites. So the first thing I'll say with the new culverts going in as a part of the Picayune Strand project is there will be associated water quality monitoring and flow monitoring. So we'll be able to see what is really happening and going on with that as well. But to address the water quality concerns that we all have, and when I say that we all have, all stakeholders have, the Water Management District said, well, you know, let's go ahead and get a feasibility study going to help us gain a better understanding on how some of the water flows from more of the upstream areas, and also to put our heads together and brainstorm with local stakeholders on what we could do, like what projects could be done to help improve the water quality flowing into these downstream areas. And so, but what our main goal of that was to do this in a very collaborative environment, working with all stakeholders, both environmental, agricultural, urban stakeholders, and bringing everyone together and other local agencies in a very expedited manner. So this kind of gives an overview of kind of where we're at, where we were at with this particular study. So again, what we wanted to do was do this in a very expedited fashion. A lot of times these feasibility studies can take anywhere from 15 to 18 months. Our goal with this was at the end of the day to line this study up to be complete with the start of the state of Florida's legislative session. Because this is being done outside of SERP, we knew we would also have to leverage funding outside of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And so to do that, in working with stakeholders, we wanted to be able to also give them information, legislative summaries, and a document that could easily describe the situation and be able to communicate that very succinctly to state legislators. And so to do that, we needed to be able to have the study pretty much fairly complete by December. And that's the reason why we wanted to do this in an expedited fashion. So again, it was really to look at some of the current and the future flows that are coming off of that watershed. So this project got going this past July of 2020. Even though it has a completion date of March 2021, really the bulk of the work will be complete by this December. And again, we wanted to do this in a very collaborative fashion, engage the public. So we've conducted 2 public meetings to date. We had our first meeting in August and our second meeting was in October. And then the outcome of this is really to look at how we could identify a suite of various project alternatives. And what I mean by that are, you know, land availability in this area is very constrained. And we needed to be able to look at various project alternatives that weren't very costly, that can be very quickly implemented, but can have a huge impact in improving water quality. So, you know, a suite of project alternatives, looking at advanced treatment technologies. And when I say advanced treatment technologies, leveraging work that has already been done or ongoing, such as the C43 water quality feasibility study. A lot of good work went into that. We can leverage that information. And also look at project partnerships. And what I mean by project partnerships are public-public partnerships or public-private partnerships. And also look at an array of funding options such that whether there are cost-shared grant funding options to try to put some of these projects in place. And so what we wanted to do, go to this next one, is again, I was talking about this collaborative approach. So what we mean by that is we really wanted to leverage the local stakeholder knowledge, and we wanted to make sure that we had all stakeholders at the table working together to find solutions. So that means, like I said, environmental groups, the agricultural community, urban community, local agencies, Collier County, DEP, Water Management District, FDACS. We've all come together and we formed several different groups. We've been meeting a lot. We have the working group, which meets monthly, and we have a technical group who's also digging into all the existing information and bringing it all together. And then all that work will culminate in both a draft and a final feasibility study. That'll contain what they call an information collection report, which is looking for some of all that existing information that is out there and how we can leverage that knowledge. It plans to have what we call a legislative overview, and this is literally a one-page sheet that within a minute you could understand what the issue is and what would be some potential fixes for that and those potential costs. It will have a funding options and also recommendations. The recommendation sections is very important. While we have a lot of monitoring going on out in this area, and this map that is on your screen, this is a map that shows a lot of the land that's out there. Here we have the Picayune project right here. You have Collier Seminole State Park south of US 41. You have the agricultural area here, and then off to the west, you have urban. And then there's private land ownership. So most of the land ownership in these areas is either private or public, but the public land ownership is those outstanding Florida waters, which again has some of those additional protections. So going back to what we talked about here in the recommendation section, we know that one recommendation that would come out of this would be to gain a full understanding of all the upstream sources and all the upstream flows. We know that there's going to be upstream coming from the Picayune Strand project. We already know that there's water coming out of the Belle Meade area and from the farming area. But again, more upstream under US 41, what is the contribution coming from there? So that's what I mean by those recommendations. It could be for some additional synoptic monitoring to gain that better understanding to provide for a better solution. So we talked about land availability. It's very limited around in this area. And then also we talked about those project partnerships. And so that's going to be another very big part of this feasibility study moving forward. So again, it's really to take a look at, the quality of the water that's all coming off on this area and look at some of those more passive type projects that could be done, whether they're small constructed treatment wetland areas, maybe you couple those with some advanced treatment to improve the performance. And again, in those public-private partnerships or those private partnerships. And again, this is moving in a very fast forward and expedited manner. So what are the next steps for this, since it's been moving along rather quickly? The collection information report right now is complete. We are currently working on the legislative summary. We have a draft of that right now, and it should be done shortly. Our third public meeting is set. This date has been changed. It is now tentatively for December 15th. And then the next step will be to have a draft feasibility report done in early January, with the final one being complete by March 31st. And again, the reason why these dates are important is the need to be able to communicate the importance to state legislators. Committee meetings typically start in November, December, and then the session starts in January. So to have some concrete documents for whether it's some of our local stakeholders who expressed an interest in that and being able to have the ability to lobby state legislators. We'll have that document complete here shortly. We also have a website up and going, and that address is listed here. And you can go there and get some additional information and see all the deliverables that we have to date. I'd say with that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jen. That was really outstanding, the way you laid that out. I know that I've been attending many of the workshops, and the work that's being done on such a compressed timeline has been really great because of the collaboration by all of the stakeholders and members of the public. I'd like to go to public comment first on this one. Yvette, do we have anyone who would like to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Brad Kernel, followed by Andrew Tyler.
Hello, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Brad.
Great, this is Brad Cornell on behalf of Audubon Western Everglades and also Audubon, Florida. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment just briefly. And Jennifer Leeds, thank you very much for a comprehensive and very succinct report on the feasibility study. I've been participating along with many of my colleagues, and it has been a diverse stakeholder process. I want to flag one facet of the study report that is still in draft form that goes to the issue that Ms. Leeds identified, which is the constrained nature of land availability to build projects to clean up water that will be coming from the restoration flows. One of the obvious ways to reduce the need for big projects to clean up water is to address source controls, whether it's from urban or agricultural nutrient pollution coming into those flows. And as Jennifer Leeds had pointed out, we need to immediately have a recommendation for starting a parallel collaborative interagency and public-private partnership effort to look at ways to handle or reduce sources of pollution before they even get into the water. This is going to be a way to reduce the need for land downstream and the investments that we're going to need there. Plus, it will amplify the benefits of those kinds of projects by reducing the amount of pollution that actually gets into the water. So, you know, in a collaborative fashion, I think there's a great deal to be gained from a parallel source control process. And part of that also obviously is to ask the legislature to invest in enough investigation of the sources themselves. There's an urban community that we saw on the map, as well as upstream urban communities up the East Trail, as well as agricultural sources. So anyway, long way of saying we're supportive of this effort, and we just want to add a parallel collaborative source control effort in addition to that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have Andrew Tyler.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you for having me back a second time. I should have saved my questions until now, and I apologize for wasting time earlier. Yeah, so a lot of the runoff from the agricultural area that's specific to this phase of the study already exists, and we know where it goes now. Is there any monitoring downstream of Tomato Road going through the Indian Village and down towards Port of the Islands? And are there any data that say what happens to that runoff today?
Jennifer Leeds, can you address that question?
Yes. Yeah, actually, there's monitoring throughout the area. There's currently culverts under US 41, County Road 92, but apart from that, there's a lot of ecological monitoring that not only the Water Management District does, but I know that Collier County does, and Collier Seminole State Park and other areas do down in that area. I could say if you're interested in learning more about that data, what it is and what it's kind of showing, you know, we'd be happy to give you some of that information.
Thank you. And how would I get that?
If I can get your contact information, then we can definitely contact you and put you in touch.
Thank you. I'd be happy to do that. If I find your email on the website and send it to you.
Yes, or Andrew, what you can do is just send me an email. You have my email address and I'll be glad to get it
Yeah.
to the district staff.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I will do so.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Mr. Robert Wiley?
If you would go back to the first slide in this presentation where you showed your flow arrows, I think you've got a few flow directions that don't exist in there. I didn't know if you wanted to update your graphic or not as this report goes forward.
Mr. Wiley, the presentation that's up right now has a timer, so I'm unable to do that.
Okay, well, basically what I was looking at is along the western boundary of the Seminole State Park, you show what appears to be the indication of a ditch which runs all along the western boundary and then puts flow underneath State Route, County Route 92. That does not exist. There's only a partial ditch along the eastern side of the old ag field is up there, but the rest of the way down it's not there, and there is no crossing under County Route 92. And then there's also the question that needs to be investigated because I do not know the status of it, but the old Bellmead Tram Road, the railroad grade through there that goes right through the park's property, I'm not sure that water actually is able to cross over that very well, so that may need to be further verified because most of the water entering that area wants to kick off to the eastern side and come down through the one ditch that's there. I know that the project is proposing to put a new box culvert underneath County Route 92, and that's fine, but you don't really have a good flow out of there. Water is going to tend to be somewhat restricted in getting to the south. So just wanted to put you on notice that you may want to reflect that in your graphic.
Thank you very much for that input. We appreciate it.
And the next public speaker is Marissa Caruso, followed by Meredith Budd.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Marissa Caruso. I'm with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. I appreciate the opportunity to comment today on this item. I first wanted to thank you and recognize Chairwoman's leadership on advancing this issue and elevating it, and also to the district as a whole for taking on this feasibility study on an expedited timeframe. I think accelerating the timeline in completing this study is really in recognition of the importance of addressing the water quality concerns and protecting the outstanding Florida waters downstream, which are currently already not meeting water quality standards for parameters like nitrogen and phosphorus. So it's obviously certainly very time intensive, and I would also like to echo some of Brad's comments earlier about the need to supplement the important work in this feasibility study that's going to develop and implement water quality treatment project options with some other parallel efforts to work on source control from any sources that are contributing to water quality impairments in this area. This is a really critical area for restoration as a whole, and we would support the ongoing efforts to ensure that we are addressing this in a holistic manner. So we look forward to continuing to work with all of the stakeholders involved in this process as the feasibility study moves forward and as any other efforts are considered in the future. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
The next public speaker, Meredith Budd.
Hi there. Good afternoon again. Meredith Budd on behalf of the Florida Wildlife Federation. So thank you, Ms. Leeds, for the presentation. I agree, I believe, with previous commenters, very well articulated and succinct way of laying out the study. And I just wanted to also echo comments that have already been mentioned, and so I will try not to take up too much of your time. With the idea, and I think you mentioned it in the presentation, of this collaborative effort of looking at where the water is coming from and sources, and the importance of having the opportunity to work together, perhaps in a parallel project, as it's been noted throughout the feasibility study process thus far, that looking at direct source control is out of the purview, so to speak, of this specific study. But looking at ways to identify sources of pollution and working in a parallel manner to address those. One thing I did want to mention is the idea of identifying targets, water quality target standards for the downstream estuaries for the receiving water bodies. That's something that I know throughout the process has been touched on, and just ensuring that actual water quality standards and targets are being referenced and met through this effort. I appreciate the opportunity, one, to speak today and provide comments, and the opportunity for the Federation to participate in the working groups and the technical group for the feasibility.
I can work on this screen, right? Can I minimize?
And just thank you so much. Appreciate the time and all the effort put forth by the district and all of the participants within the feasibility study. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have no speakers.
Thank you, Yvette. I really appreciate all of the public comment and the time that many of you have taken to participate in the stakeholder working groups and to provide information on this, because it's so important to our area and so important to water quality in our area in particular. So thank you very much. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, item number 7, the Big Cypress Basin Boundary Study Update. Akin Awasana and Jeffrey Udicello are going to bring us up to date on this. Go ahead, Akin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to have the opportunity today to talk to you about this effort that the district was directed to undertake by the legislature. This is an opportunity to present to the interested stakeholders and the general public work that my team has been doing for the last several months. Over the past year, maybe a little bit longer, there have been discussions within the region, including, I believe, at least 1 or 2 discussions at this board about the potential to modify or change administrative boundaries in Big Cypress Basin. In its legislative session earlier this year, the legislature included provisional language in Florida Chapter 2020-111, House Bill 5001, tasking the South Florida Water Management District to conduct a study to recommend the most appropriate geographic boundaries of the Big Cypress Basin. The language, which is quoted on the slide you are seeing here, recommends a number of very specific or key language that the district was able to rely on in scoping out the task provided or given to us by the legislature. First, the work is required to be based on the common watershed within the Big Cypress Basin. That's, we understand, to be a mandate to use a watershed-based approach. Advanced slide. Okay, thank you. Secondly, the language required a scientifically supported approach, which was something we took to heart and we'll be talking to you about later on in this presentation. And finally, the district is required to report back to the governor, president of the Senate, and speaker of the House by February of 2021, which is a goal we intend to accomplish. We have taken this charge to heart and put together a team of engineers and hydrologists in the district, led by Dr. Eric Flake, who has since retired from the district, and Dr. Udicello, who you'll be hearing from in a minute or so, and a couple of others. That team has completed its work and it's finalizing review, which includes this public meeting, giving the general public an opportunity to see what we've done and provide some feedback. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeffrey DiCello to describe the work that his team did and the findings. I will join him at the end of the presentation to take questions and provide additional context as necessary. Jeff?
Jeff, we can't hear you. If you can unmute, please. Jeff, we still can't hear you. It's not me. Jeff, you do have control of the presentation, but we still cannot hear you. Jeff, I'm taking back control just to.
How's that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. I could hear Akeen, and I tried speaking and it was not working. And so, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. I apologize for that. Thank you, Akeen. Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
Yes, let's talk briefly about a science-based watershed delineation. Science-based watershed delineation divides regional land areas into smaller units or watersheds based on physical laws. This kind of approach considers the actual environmental features of a landscape. And of course, land elevation is a key factor defining runoff from the rainfall. Of course, there are a variety of other factors that are considered, such as land use, man-made improvements to drainage features, animal habitats, and subsurface properties of aquifers, among others. A science-based watershed delineation is based on measurements of physical properties. It would also be repeatable and verifiable by independent observation. And finally, it considers a variety of sources of information. It's also worth noting that this emphasis on a science-based approach kind of begs the question, what would a different approach be? And so contrasting approaches to doing delineation may use political or legal factors to establish boundaries, such as administrative boundaries like county lines or landowner property limits. I'm going to go through now the approach for the delineation that we used in this. There are a total of 9 steps, and I'll go through them here one by one. Step 1 is to review the current catchment boundaries. We used geographical information systems, or GIS, to overlay the existing boundary maps and coverages to see where any existing lines match up or may differentiate from one another. Step 2 is to evaluate the topography. Use a digital elevation data set in GIS to compare the high and the low landscape elevations within the catchment boundaries. Step 3 is to examine aerial photography. Survey old and new satellite imagery, any kind of flyover pictures that may be available, etc., to assess the current and historical land use, any kind of natural drainage features, as well as man-made drainage modifications. Step 4 is to review road maps. Roads are typically constructed on higher land surfaces, but they may have bridges or culverts or ditches that affect local drainage in the area. Step 5 is to conduct a field visit. On-site reconnaissance will help confirm drainage patterns and features. Field visits are also particularly useful immediately after a notable rainfall. If you can go out even within a few hours of a rainfall event and see how drainage is occurring on the landscape, or if not within hours, within a day or two, provides a lot of information. Step 6 is to review permits. Regulatory actions and authorized permits, such as the district's environmental resource permits, will describe drainage patterns and modifications resulting from permitted projects. Step 7, review soil maps when they are available. Soil maps are a valuable secondary source of information on things like land use and vegetation and subsurface hydrology. Step 8 is to review other historical documents. These could include old county road maps, USGS quad sheets. Sometimes local landowners may have aerial photography of their properties or their farms, and this also will provide additional use for information. And then step 9 is to distribute the proposed delineation for review. And this is to seek additional review from subject matter experts. I want to take a minute here and define some terms. The terms we'll be using here come from the district's ARC Hydro Enhanced Database, or AHED. And these terms are, I'm going to show a list here of the district totals of some of these terms from the largest to the smallest. And so within the AHED framework, there are a total of 4 basins in the entire South Florida Water Management District jurisdiction. And so these are the largest land aggregations that are in the AHED system. The next smallest land aggregation is considered a subbasin. And in the entire district, there are a total of 12 subbasins at this scale. And just as a side note, the Big Cypress Swamp that we'll be discussing today is considered one of these 12 subbasins. The next smallest land aggregation is considered to be a watershed, and there are 227 of these across the district. And then the smallest land aggregation is considered a sub-watershed, and there's a total of 633 of these in the district. And as one final note, earlier drainage studies or projects in other areas of the district may follow other definitions, but these are the terms that we'll be using for the course of our discussion today. This is a map of the whole region. There's a lot of information on this map. I'm not going to go over all of it, but I'll highlight a few of the key features here. I'll use the pointer as well. The first thing to note is this green line here. This is showing the existing Big Cypress Swamp subbasin. And so this is one of those 12 subbasins across the district. And this is the main thing we're talking about here today. The subbasin immediately to the east is the Everglades subbasin, and then the subbasin to the north is the Caloosahatchee subbasin. Inside the Big Cypress Swamp subbasin, there are a couple large natural wetland drainage features, such as the Big Cypress National Preserve here, as well as the Big Cypress Swamp. In the northern reaches of the subbasin, you have Ocalaway-Coochie Slough up here, as well as Corkscrew Marsh. And these are natural drainage features that drain to the south. In addition, you can see here, the blue lines represent waterways or canals. The straight ones are man-made canals. And then some of these ones that aren't as straight, they're kind of a squiggly line. Those are still the natural creeks or rivers. And you can see that the natural drainage patterns across the sub-basin typically drain to the south or to the southwest or to the west, and they drain into the Gulf of Mexico. And then for scale, in the bottom left corner here of this map, you can see in red there kind of a thumbnail view of where this subbasin fits within the greater scope of the state of Florida. And so the main work of this project was to examine the entire existing subbasin and boundaries, and where needed, propose a revision to that subbasin based on this scientific delineation approach that we've been discussing. You can see here there's 9 areas that kind of warranted a further deep dive into the land in those areas versus what the subbasin boundary was showing. And it turns out that as a result of the study, 8 of these 9 areas resulted in a change to the existing subbasin. Again, the existing subbasin is shown in that bright green color, and then the proposed revisions are shown on the map in that red color. And so the final product is the map on the left side here. This is the product that directly responds to the initial mandate that came down from the legislature that Dean introduced at the beginning of the presentation. And then on the right side of the screen here, there is a corresponding report that was written that provides a little bit more of the detail and the explanation that went into the work. But these are the main products that have resulted from this mandate that we've received. I'd like to close out here, finish with the closeout steps. We've had thorough internal review with different departments here at the district. We've briefed staff of local governments, such as those towns and counties listed here. Of course, today we're having the public meeting with the Big Cypress Basin Board. And then final steps will be to finalize the report and deliver the results to the governor and the legislature in Tallahassee next February. At this time, Akin, I can pass it back to you, or we can take comments from the public.
Well,
Thank you very
first-
much, Jeff.
Yes, thank you both very much. This is the chair. I wanted to just thank both of you very much. I don't know if you mentioned it, but our deadline, I believe, was February 1st for this scientific report. And the work that you have done to not only meet that deadline, but come in way ahead of it is just commendable. And I want to thank both of you very much for your work on this. I have a question for you. When you analyze the basin boundary from a scientific perspective, and you noted a few of those changes, minor changes in some areas, was there any common element to those changes that you took away from your scientific analysis?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Common element. So as we explained in the methodology, the main driving factors that resulted in those red lines that are the proposed changes, a lot of it was updated data. It was simply better topography data, higher resolution topography data that enabled us to kind of get a better feel for the layout of the land and what the actual natural drainage patterns were. In some cases, there has been some development and some land use changes. So properties that previously were forested or just open spaces, the land use has changed. And now there's some development going in with some roads and some drainage patterns and whatnot. Some of it was just a better representation of the drainage patterns around some of the permitted lands that the district has. I mentioned ERPs in the presentation. And so some of those red lines that changed there were a reflection of just understanding better how the drainage is coming off some of those permitted properties that the district has.
It appeared that it covered, the basin boundary covered quite a large area, even to the east, and more than Collier County. Is that correct?
Yes, if I remember correctly, the entire basin covers probably 5 to 6 counties. If I could flip back, we could look at the map. But the majority of it, of course, is Lee and Collier County, but it touches Hendry County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and the one to the south, I believe Monroe. Is that correct, Akin? Is that what you would call as well?
Jeff, you do have control of the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, there's parts of Monroe, a very minor part of Dade and Broward, a lot of Collier, Lee, and parts of Hendry. That's correct.
Okay, well, let's see if there's any public comment on this item. Yvette, is there anyone who would like to speak from the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have, first speaker is Dan DeLisi, followed by Robert Wiley.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I'm thankful that you're bringing this before the Basin Board. I am speaking today on behalf of Lee County, who I consult with on water policy issues. We would like to thank the Water Management District for your work on this study. We appreciate that the district for the last couple years since you've joined the board has talked about letting science lead policy discussions. And in this case, you all are really putting out there what the science shows. Of course, with the Big Cypress Basin, there's just a lot of history involved with how the basin was created and why the boundary was created the way it was. Because as Jeff showed you, the boundary, even before they did this analysis of what the actual basin was much larger than what the Big Cypress Basin board looks at. As a former chair of the Big Cypress Basin board, I really got into the history of this. And as I said, and as Jeff started out, the basin boundaries are created based on a number of issues, including politics. And that's essentially what we have now. But when we look at this area and all of Southwest Florida, in fact, Southwest Florida was never part of the Central and Southern Flood Control District. None of the counties, Lee County, Collier County, that little bit of Charlotte County, none of us were ever taxed as part of the Southern and the Central and Southern Flood Control District. And in fact, when the districts were created, there was a sixth district created, and Southwest Florida was in that sixth district. And the Big Cypress Basin was created after that, after the dissolving of that sixth district, when these areas were added to the South Florida Water Management District. And the initial intent was actually to have Lee County as part of the Big Cypress Basin, but for political reasons, Lee County opted out. When we look at now this basin and putting the science out there, obviously Lee County wants to be included within the Big Cypress Basin. The basin boundaries don't need to be drawn purely on science. There is that little piece that exists in the current Big Cypress Basin that's in Monroe County. I mean, there's a lot of history for how that little sliver got in the Big Cypress Basin in the first place. You don't need to include uninhabited conservation areas in Miami-Dade, Broward County. You don't need to take out pieces of that are uninhabited in Collier County. We can use logic here as well as science to come up with a boundary that makes sense. And certainly in our opinion, that's extending the boundary into Lee County based on that basin line. But I don't think, and I don't think anyone really thinks you need to contract it in Eastern Collier County or expand it into counties that really don't have a population base where there would be any point at all in having that expansion. Just create an administrative bureaucratic hassle really to change that line. So again, thank you. I hope we continue this discussion. I thank you for your leadership, Madam Chair, because this is a big decision and one that people will remember and thank you for in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Mr. Wiley, followed by Peter Simmons.
Yes, this is Robert Wiley with Collier County Stormwater again. Just wanted to ask a question of Akeem and Jeff. With what's going on with Army Corps and their Western Everglades Restoration Project and what they're proposing as possible revisions to the L28 Interceptor Canal, which would bring even more water from Hendry County down into the Big Cypress. Is your report going to address what the Corps is considering, or are you just going to leave the L28 as is and then make some change in the future?
Jeff, could I take this?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for that question. Madam Chair, if I may proceed with the response.
Absolutely. Go
Yes.
ahead.
So thanks for that question. The watersheds, as they are developed, were made to be updated as new information become available and new changes regards development or any changes that alter how water flows become available. While we used the topographic information that was gathered by the work project, any changes that the Corps may implement or we and the Corps may implement as part of that project would reflect in the later definition of the boundaries. We are not proactively or we are not preemptively drawing in those boundaries.
I didn't know if your report was going to even address the issues that were being evaluated by the Corps. I know your map probably, you're going to have to base your map on existing conditions, but I just didn't know what was going to be in your report about possible revisions coming through the federal agencies.
Yeah, at this time, the current thinking was to have the report document the basis for the changes in the current map, but we will consider your input and see if there is a need to add language to reflect things we anticipate. But we'll have to think about that some. Current thinking and our initial thoughts and what's in the current draft are the rationale for making changes that are in the current modification of the recommended changes to the boundary.
Thank you, Ms.
Is Mr. Wiley done?
Yes, I'm done. I was just trying to see what the report was going to say. To me, I would think with the Corps' active work going on, that the report should at least mention what's going, so that the Senate and the House and the governor can be made well aware of some possible changes that would still be coming in a future edition of the map. Just the report could just simply mention it. Doesn't have to say you're supporting it, but just mention it with what I like to see.
Thank you for your comments.
Madam Chair, the next speaker is Peter Simmons, sorry.
Oops, I was just going to say, there we go. I hope I'm muted now. Thank you.
You are. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I was just sitting here listening contently. But Dan DeLisi, I wanted to thank you for your comments. I wasn't going to speak, but you did speak about it. And I just wanted to, more than anything, thank Chairwoman Roman. I'd like to thank, and please keep in your prayers, Senator Ray Rodriguez. You know, for this big Cypress, you talked, Dan, about having lines and districts based on science, not politics. And I just want to echo that statement. And I want to thank all the hard work that's gone in to this point by then Representative Ray Rodriguez, certainly Chairwoman Roman, as I mentioned, Chairman Chauncey Goss, Mayor Bill Ribble, and Jim Bosch in Estero, as long as Lisa and Arlene and Matt, who are staff in Bonita Springs at the staff level. I mean, everybody on every level, every different level has worked together. It certainly has been a process. It's been rewarding to see the scientific study that came back. And I know that there will be certainly discussion and some resolution of some in the next legislative session up in Tallahassee. So like I said, Dan, I wasn't going to say anything, but you brought it up. So I just wanted to call and thank everybody that's been involved with this. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, and we're all, as we sit here and wait to see who our next president of the United States is going to be, and control of the U.S. Senate and every other thing that's hyper partisan, isn't it refreshing? Isn't it nice to have in our community legislative and environmental decisions that we can make that are based on science, not based on politics, all for the good of our environment and our beloved Everglades. So thank you more than anything. It was a call, Dan, to follow up on your comment and to thank everybody involved, because I know it's been a lot of work. So thank you.
Really appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I have no additional hands raised.
Well, thank you everyone who participated in that discussion. And I want to thank Keen and Jeffrey for that presentation. Do you have someone else?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Andrew Tyler.
All
just
right.
raised his hand.
Okay, we'll hear from Andrew then.
Thank you. Sorry I was so late to the button. I wanted to give everybody else an opportunity before jumping in once more. Gentlemen who put this together, thank you. At the end of the presentation, there is one slide that you jumped over, I think inadvertently. On that slide, perhaps you can get to this through politics versus science. In the very, we're all talking here about the western part of the district. In the very eastern corner, you've now got a slide that shows the sub-basin becoming part of the Okeechobee Basin, which makes no physical sense whatsoever in my mind. And I'd appreciate it if you could educate me as to the thinking behind that. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. I'm looking at the slides here on my own computer. What slide number is that?
Well, I believe it's going to be 14.
Slide, Jeff, if you would back up at 2 slides.
I don't have control. Oh.
Okay, that's good.
There we go. So down in Monroe
yeah.
there, you have it in light blue.
Yeah. So
this is Okeechobee Basin.
Yeah. So thank you, first of all, for your question. And we kind of anticipated that we might get a question like this, which was why we included in this slide deck.
Excuse me, Akeem. Excuse me, Akeem. Let's go back to the slide with the map on it, please.
Okay.
As Akeem explains.
Okay.
There you go. Let's stay there.
So we included this series of actually 2 or 3 slides in the slide deck just to be able to address this question if it came up. We've briefed this as we've talked within the region, and so it made sense that somebody might ask this question. As we noted, there's a difference between the administrative boundary and the watershed boundary, and there are 2 different things. Jeff mentioned earlier in his presentation that outside of the watershed basis, there are sometimes different ways of delineating boundaries. It could be based on county lines and ownership and several other factors. What we believed our current tasking was, and we kind of stayed narrowly to that tasking, was to do the scientific definition based on the watersheds. That's the red line that you see there. How that goes and becomes administrative boundaries that Mr. DeLisi in his questions asked is a process that goes beyond just the consideration of the hydrologic watersheds, but also incorporates several other factors. And I think other members of the public in asking questions kind of alluded to, but tangentially mentioned it. But specifically, what we wanted to do with this graphic that we're showing is to show you the line we have changed, which is the red line. We've made modifications to parts of that red line, and that is the hydrologic watershed-based definition of Big Cypress Swamp sub-basin. How that goes on to become the purple lines to show the areas in the tans or the areas in the pinks, which are administrative boundaries, is a step that goes over and above or beyond the work we've done. And the work we've done is just input into that process. Does this help answer your question?
Yes, I understand that you're juggling a lot of balls here. I noticed the red line shifts this basin essentially out of Miami-Dade, where it was touching before, and there's the Indian village down there, and I wondered how they felt about this. I don't, as a scientist, I don't understand how an Okeechobee Basin can be present in Monroe County, I guess is my problem.
Yeah. So the Jeff on, I think the second or third of the slide described the number of basins within the district and the number of sub-basins. The district essentially is made up of really 2 large basins. There are a couple more depending on where you are, but we describe generally everything that's in Big Cypress Basin as one, and everything that's outside of Big Cypress Basin has been part of the Okeechobee Basin. Those administrative boundaries, they share names with underlying hydrologic boundaries, and that's why we kind of took the effort to try to describe the task that we've taken on, which is we're looking at the common watersheds, the areas where if you dropped water, it will flow in one direction or the other. And so that doesn't happen nicely along a county line, but sometimes it makes sense to draw an administrative boundary along a county line. So we're separating two things. I know that both of those things are of interest to the public. The part that we've tackled and the part that's part of this work that we're showing is the scientific, hydrologically based common watershed, with our focus being on taking a look at the existing watershed for Big Cypress Swamp and showing where, based on new LiDAR information, based on regulatory action that flows water in one direction or the other, based on land use information, where we could make the adjustment to make the boundary line up properly, so that we're showing if you had rain across this line, on one side it will flow towards Big Cypress, on the second side it will flow towards what's called the Okeechobee Basin. Now there are names for subparts of that basin, but if it's outside of Big Cypress to the east, it's Okeechobee Basin. That's just how they've been named and defined.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler, and thank you, Akeem, for that explanation. Yvette, is there any more public comment at this time?
I have no additional public commenters.
Okay, so we want to make sure that we include everyone who wants an opportunity to speak on this item. It was a good discussion, and I really want to thank Akeem and Jeff for putting together such a great presentation, and thank you very, very much. We'll move on now to item 8 on the agenda, which is our regional partnership project updates with Sean Meyer. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Sean Meyer, the lead project manager for the Big Cypress Basin. I'm here today to give you an update on 2 regional partnership projects. Funding for these projects was recently approved in our adopted fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, and we are moving forward with implementation of these projects. So the first project is the second phase of the filter marsh expansion at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Prior to 2009, stormwater runoff emanated from residential areas to the west of Goodlet Frank Road, as well as Goodlet Frank Road itself and the Coastland Center Mall. These areas would flow into a drainage canal that moved south along Goodlet Frank Road before then traveling east through 2 channels and eventually discharging to the Gordon River and ultimately Naples Bay. In 2009, the filter marsh at the Conservancy, as well as Freedom Park, were constructed in order to redirect flows and treat incoming stormwater before simply discharging straight into the Gordon River, which is impaired for nutrients, including total nitrogen and total phosphorus. So now as we zoom in and we take a closer look at the project area on the Conservancy's campus here, phase 1 of the project is currently under construction. Phase 2 then will complete this expansion project by installing aquatic plants around this newly expanded area. In addition, once construction is complete and the plants have been installed, water quality samples will be taken monthly at 3 locations for 1 year. And then these samples will be taken to a certified lab for analysis. A final report will then be given and a presentation made at a future Big Cypress Basin board meeting at the conclusion of this water quality sampling to highlight their findings. This expanded filter marsh will increase the efficiency by which total nitrogen and total phosphorus is removed. There will also be more habitat available for aquatic wildlife, and this will continue to provide educational value for the Conservancy's numerous visitors throughout the year. The second phase of this project will cost $115,500. Funds are budgeted and available, and we are moving forward with an allocation of $46,200. The second project is for ecosystem restoration at Audubon's Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Marsh and prairie areas of this 13,000 acre sanctuary were once dominated by diverse grasses and sedges that played host to abundant wildlife, from the least killifish to the threatened wood stork, but have now become overgrown by nuisance vegetation primarily by Carolina willow. So this ecological shift has reduced the amount of available wildlife habitat and also presents challenges for vegetation management. Realizing that something needed to be done to correct this shift, Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary's land management team began restoration efforts a few years ago to remove and control willow as well as other woody vegetation through mechanical harvesting. And to date, they have removed approximately 670 acres. But they still have a long way to go to reach their goal, and they realize that this is a long-term commitment to rehabilitate these regional ecosystems. They have about 1,200 acres on their property that they still plan to restore. They will be harvesting 200 acres at the end of this upcoming dry season, which will then reduce that total acreage down to 1,000. And then the specific location that will be chosen for mechanical harvesting, this will depend on current water levels, which will impact their ability to get their equipment into certain areas. Removing this overgrown willow and woody vegetation will allow for the regrowth of grasses and sedge and reestablish native habitat for wildlife. The cost to remove the 200 acres is $260,000. Funds are budgeted and available, and we are moving forward with an allocation of $100,000. And that concludes my discussion of our regional partnership projects.
Thank you, Sean. I really feel that these two projects are really, really solid and very, very important for our area. And I really appreciate your work that you did on these projects. Let's see if we have any public comment regarding these. Yvette, do we have any public comment?
Madam Chair, I have no public commenters.
Okay, go ahead, Sean. I think you've got the next one as well on Lake Trafford.
Yes. Thank you again, Madam Chair. So I now want to move on and give you an update on 3 Lake Trafford projects. Again, funding for these projects were approved in our adopted fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, and we are moving forward with implementation of these projects. However, before we jump into the projects, I want to give you just a little background about the lake. Lake Trafford is a shallow 1,500 acre lake in Collier County. It's about 50 miles northeast of Naples. It is the largest natural lake south of Lake Okeechobee, and it has an existing watershed boundary of about 18,400 acres, which consists primarily of urban stormwater runoff, croplands, and improved pastures, as well as wetlands. So due to excessive buildup of nutrient-rich sediment or muck, the lake was dredged from 2006 to 2010 for about $21.4 million. And this removed 6 million cubic yards of muck from the lake's bottom. In 2011, an interagency Lake Trafford management team was created to enhance the coordination and leverage resources on work at the lake. This team, initially spearheaded by efforts from Florida Gulf Coast University, began work on a Lake Trafford management plan, which was completed in 2018 to provide guidance on the long-term management of the lake. So these 3 projects I'll be discussing today, they really fall right into the framework of that plan and were approved by Lake Trafford team members at their recent meeting in September. So with that in mind, I'll move into the first project, which is phytoplankton monitoring by the Water School at Florida Gulf Coast University. So phytoplankton are the basis of many aquatic systems, but when too many nutrients become available, these phytoplankton can grow out of control and form harmful algal blooms. Now, unfortunately, these harmful algal blooms have become a common occurrence on many waterways throughout Florida, and Lake Trafford is really no different. These blooms can produce extremely toxic compounds. They can have harmful effects on fish, animals, as well as people, and have adverse effects on water quality. By monitoring phytoplankton communities in the lake, FGCU scientists, they hope to gain a greater understanding of how, as well as when these blooms form, which will ultimately help to strategize ways to reduce their occurrences in the future. These water samples will be gathered monthly and taken to a laboratory for future analysis. And then a final report and presentation at a future Big Cypress Basin board meeting will be given at the end of the project to discuss their results. This study will help to address whether a particular nutrient is impacting the growth of harmful algal blooms. They will also examine the potential for seasonal influences of bloom outbreaks on the lake. And ultimately, these results may be used as a tool to guide future best management practices and prioritize restoration projects. The cost for this project is $85,749, and funds are budgeted and available, and we are moving forward with an allocation of $37,922. So the second project is an eelgrass planting project by Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, or FWC. So the Big Cypress Basin partnered with FWC last year to plant eelgrass in nearshore areas on the lake. FWC is now continuing that work as they will be putting in more eelgrass in 3 additional locations. These plantings will occur in the dry season while lake levels are low, and plant health and survival will be monitored for 1 year. And again, as before, at the end of that year, they will come back with a presentation at a future Big Cypress Basin board meeting to discuss major outcomes of the project. So by putting additional eelgrass in the lake, this will work to increase the aquatic vegetation coverage, and it also assists in working towards a larger long-term management goal, which is to achieve 30% coverage of total aquatic vegetation throughout the lake. Additional eelgrass will also provide more nutrient uptake, as well as increase areas of habitat cover for fish and wildlife. The cost for this project is $35,000. Funds are budgeted and available, and we're moving forward with an allocation of $17,500 for the project. So there's been a focus on increasing eelgrass communities within the lake over the last couple of years, but it's also important that the lake has a diverse community of aquatic plant life. So with that being said, this final project I want to discuss today is an emergent vegetation and wetland tree planting project, also by FWC. So plants will be installed in 5 locations, again at the end of the dry season when lake levels are low. And as before, plant health and survival will be monitored for 1 year. And then at the end of that year, they will come back and give a presentation at a future Big Cypress Basin board meeting to discuss their results. This project will increase aquatic plant diversity while also working towards that previously mentioned long-term management goal for aquatic vegetation coverage. And as before, more plants will increase nutrient uptake while also adding habitat cover for fish and wildlife. The cost for this project is $49,000. Funds are budgeted and available, and we are moving forward with an allocation of $24,500 for the project. And that concludes my Lake Trafford project updates.
John, I have a question about the phytoplankton monitoring. Is this the first time that we have done phytoplankton monitoring in the lake?
When you say we, are you?
Or we've had a project with the water school for phytoplankton monitoring?
We have not in the past, no. This will be the first time.
Oh, so we ought to get some new information that we haven't had access to before in regards to that for Lake Trafford.
Ideally so, yes.
Well, I really want to thank you and the Lake Trafford management team. It's a cross-functional team, and I really, really appreciate your leadership that you've been able to bring to the management team. And I think these projects are all very, very solid to maintaining and improving the water quality in the lake. Let's see if we have any public comment. Yvette, are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Beachman Fierce. And if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I apologize.
You're one of our FWC gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Beecham Furs with Florida Fish and Wildlife. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate the Big Basin of the Big Cypress Basin Board for partnering with us on these projects. And I couldn't get my hand up fast enough on the last project, the Willow Management Project, and just want to let you know that we have staff in the Crew Wildlife Environmental area that are trying to get some of the same work done. Willow Management, we've been working with your staff, with district staff for many, many years and trying to manage willow in the Crew area. And that is, we actually have more problems up there because it's drier up there than you have in the lower part of the wetland. So our project manager, Kathleen Smith, is currently working with Steve Coughlin and his staff to try to procure funds to do more willow management, to do specifically mechanical removal like they're doing in the southern part of the wetland. So any help that we can get in the future, we appreciate. I know that we've been working with Lisa on seeing what funds might be available in the future. So again, I just want to thank y'all for helping us out, serving this as a true partnership and management of Lake Trafford in the entire watershed. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, next speaker is Dan DeLisi.
So I just wanted to, again, thank you for the work you're doing on Lake Trafford. I first visited Lake Trafford. My wife started her career out in Immokalee, and she showed it to me in the early 2000s as an example of a dead lake. And, you know, the restoration of the lake has been great to see. It's nice to see the Big Cypress Basin continuing its focus on the ecological health of Lake Trafford. And again, I just want to thank you for what you're doing. It's just a great project and a great partnership that you have there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have no additional hands raised.
Well, I appreciate the comments. I know that soon after I became the chair of the Big Cypress Basin Board, I took a visit to Lake Trafford. I had remembered when the lake had been dredged so long ago, it seems now. And FWC was wonderful to give me such a thorough orientation of the lake. And it's great to hear the comments from Beecham today. And certainly we are committed to that partnership and moving forward with improving the water quality in the lake and protecting the taxpayers' investment for what it costs to dredge the lake and to help it years ago. So thank you, Beecham, for participating today and your comments. And I'd also like to thank Dan DeLisi for your comments as well. That lake is very, very important to us here. And it's important for us to continue to look at restoring the ecosystem and the water quality in that lake. So thank you very much. Our next item is the item 10, preliminary fiscal year 2021-2022 capital plan review.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Kevin Yu, lead engineer for the Big Cypress Basin. It's my pleasure to present the Big Cypress Basin's preliminary capital budget plan for fiscal year 2021-2022. I'll be walking through 5 major projects that are proposed to be funded to continue our mission. Some of these are multi-year projects and some are new projects for your consideration. The first project today is the next phase of the Cypress Canal weir replacement, which is the installation of a new water control structure in the Cypress Canal. The structure replacement is in our 5-year capital improvement plan because it's nearing the end of its useful life. However, we had the opportunity to reprioritize this project in that 5-year plan because Collier County is currently working on expanding the Vanderbilt Beach Road area. This project is to be expanding the Vanderbilt Beach Road and as well as realigning the Cypress Canal. So when we find out about that project, we decided to coordinate timelines with the county so that we can have one seamless project. The project was initially kicked off in 2019 with modeling and assessment, survey work, geotechnical borings, and from there we moved forward with design and permitting in 2020. We're looking to go out to bid in the springtime to line up with the county's construction project. Funding for this year is funding that we're proposing for this year is to kick off construction, and remaining construction work is to be funded next year. We anticipate approximately 13 months once the award is once the project has been awarded, and that should line up with the county's timeline. Although the structure still has a usable life, as you can see in the lower picture down here, this is a single concrete weir with 2 gates. It has usable life still, but the new structure will allow for a better management of groundwater in the area and provide a better response to canal water levels during the wet season and to maintain flood control. So again, the total cost of this multi-year project is about $3.95 million. We're proposing funding next year for construction in the amount of $2 million. I'll provide some further details on the project on the next 2 slides. Here, this is a close-up view of the construction area. The location of the structure will be moved from where the star is, where the current location is, to this shaded yellow area. This is the new structure outlined in the middle of the slide. The blue line is the relocated Cypress Canal, and as you can see, the road is, the old canal will be cut off by the road, and so the structure will be moving down south to accommodate for the new canal. During the assessment, we modeled the effects of the groundwater during that phase of the project. The two images here show there will be both a dry and wet season groundwater benefit. The dry season benefit for the groundwater is shown on the left, and the wet season on the right. The key takeaway here is that the canal system in Big Cypress Basin, they intersect with the aquifer, and with the structure in place, we'll be able to better protect the water resources and improve flood control for the people and the environment in this area. The structure will act as a bathtub plug almost, where we will be able to retain water during the dry season and assist in wildfire management. And we can also open the structure up during the wet season and allow the water to drain out of the area to manage to provide flood control to the residents in this area. We've been working closely with Collier County to ensure that the timing of the installation of this project, along with their project, will benefit all stakeholders along this stretch. We're looking forward to the successful implementation of both projects. The next project is a subtask of the larger canal improvements project. We call this the canal bank stabilization task. We started this to assess areas where bank erosion is occurring within the primary canal system. And we're working on developing a course of action to restore the banks. The goals of the work essentially are to protect public and private infrastructure along the canals, improve canal flood protection for property owners along the canals, and also protect the canal right-of-ways. This is more than just routine maintenance work on the canals done by the field station. The upper right-hand portion of the slide here shows an example of a typical bank repair done by the field station, which they do very well. As you can see here, this is about a 50 to 60 foot section in the purple area. And after the stabilization work is complete, it is right around the same sloping and is restored. This was along the Corkscrew Canal area. The upper left-hand picture, on the other hand, shows shows an example of what we are planning for this task. This is actually about a 650-foot section along the Faka Union Canal. And as you can see here, the top of the bank has eroded a good number of feet in about 10 years. So what we're trying to do here, we will be working on performing additional assessments throughout the system to look for areas like this. This area specifically, we will be addressing this year. And so we're looking to to perform this work using outside resources, which will allow the field station to perform other tasks to accomplish our mission to provide flood control for the area. This is an ongoing program that's to be done in parallel with the larger canal improvements project that I'll be going into on the next slide. So as a result, we will be setting aside funding every year to execute the task. So this is an update on the next phase of the Canal Flood Control Improvements Project. This is a multi-year program that we're using to evaluate flood management. The goal is to improve flood control by recapturing the canal cross-section to the maximum extent possible and reducing the need to acquire additional land. The areas on this map were selected based on a flood protection level of service study that was conducted in 2017. That study was performed to determine the existing capacity of the canal system to handle flooding conditions and determine where potential bottlenecks may exist. From that study, we found that there were areas along the primary canal system highlighted in these green ovals that we found that they had been providing restoration improvements in that area will provide better flood control and in the slower draining areas of the basin. So improvement efforts are underway to help protect residents from flooding concerns. We are currently modeling the project, modeling the canals and providing conceptual design on where we might want to go first. The project started last year with modeling of the areas where the improvements may help, and we're slated to complete this modeling in the first half of 2021. We will provide a follow-up on the project before a final budget meeting next year, or at the end of this fiscal year, which includes a review of the findings and potential scope of the improvements. So for next year, we are proposing a funding in the amount of $795,000 to complete the design and begin construction contracts, as well as do the canal bank stabilization task that I discussed previously. The next project I'd like to bring up is the new water control structure near the intersection of the C1 and Miller canals. This project this new structure will be complementing the C1 Canal Improvements Project. As you saw on the previous screen, the C1 connector canal connects the Golden Gate Main and the Miller canals, and this structure in the yellow star is where we are believe that a structure there would provide additional benefit to the area. We plan on using this structure as a tool for the dry season groundwater management, very similar to the Curry Canal structure located right off of Immokalee Road. What this is supposed to do, again, it's like the bathtub analogy I provided earlier for the Cypress Canal structure, where this will act as a bathtub plug during the dry season and retain water, which will provide additional benefits to the residents of this area, specifically for major wildfires from happening in the later part of the dry season, and also provide additional water supply for users in that area. The results from the canal improvements will provide us with a conceptual design as well as a proposed location for the project. And once we have those results, we'll come back to this board at a future meeting with our findings. So as a result, we are proposing funding in the coming year in the amount of $250,000 to start design if the conceptual design proves beneficial. The next project is the evaluation of the removal of the I-75 Canal Weir number 1, or I-75W1. That structure is located near the junction of the I-75 and Golden Gate main canals, as indicated by the star on this map here. This structure is a long concrete weir with a single slide gate. Here's the long concrete weir right through the middle of this picture in the upper part of the slide. And the slide gate is located on the right-hand side. This structure is nearing the end of its useful life as well. And we are looking at, we're evaluating the removal of the structure in our canal improvements project to determine if removal of the structure provides benefit in managing resources along both the Golden Gate main canals or Golden Gate main and the I-75 canals. The newer structure downstream of I-75W1 is the GG2 structure. This structure is, as I mentioned, is newer, as well as it holds the water. It has a differing higher elevation that it operates at, so we can actually maintain water more efficiently through the I-75 canal with just GG2. So if we find that removing the structure will provide additional benefit, it actually will be useful because we will be saving taxpayer dollars because the structure may not be needed, which will save in terms of maintenance and operation of the structure. So if the assessment validates the removal is warranted, we're recommending funding in the amount of $250,000 next year to develop that removal plan. The final project I'm bringing to today is the final phase and the fourth and final phase of the remote monitoring and communications project, specifically the extension of the district's communication backbone into Collier County. This is a multi-year, multi-phase project that was started in 2015 to provide near real-time remote monitoring and operation of the BCB water control structures. In the previous phases, we installed antenna poles, upgraded communications equipment, placed a connection between Collier County's fiber network and the Faka Union Tower, located down here and indicated by the dark line between these two icons. We also augmented remote operations at the GG 1, 2, and 3 structures. The installation of this project also provided an installation of a number of controls to allow for a faster response during changing conditions. It also allows the water managers of the system more efficient and precise operations throughout the year. The reason why we are proposing this tower is because, simply put, the current network connections are not 100% reliable. They're really good, but they do have limitations. We are also going through a commercial connection, which can be challenging, as I'm sure many of you know, during major storms. Hurricane Irma and Tropical Storm Eta, for example, we had loss of the cellular network, which is what we're currently connected through. So as a result, the BCB water managers were unable to see the real-time canal stages. And we needed more monitoring, especially during Irma. We needed more manpower in an already taxed setting because we had other issues going on. We had down trees and other impediments. We had a lot of personnel running around getting stage information to provide back to the water manager. And that information was then passed to our partners. So what this tower will do is to complete the spur, connecting BCB to the district using a more resilient and reliable microwave connection. We are proposing installation over here in somewhere in this area, which is essentially the crew lands on the northwest corner of the county. This new tower will provide more consistent data flow to make water management decisions and provide faster communication with our partners about where problem hotspots may be present during and after heavy rains. Again, as I mentioned before, this is the final phase of the program, and once we are complete with this will be the final step in making sure that the BCB water control structures and monitoring sites can be connected through the district and into the network and provide a redundant and resilient connection. So we're proposing funding in the amount of $250,000 to start design in this coming fiscal year. Construction funding will be requested in fiscal year 2022-2023, and we anticipate completion of the construction in summer of 2024. And so with that, this is a summary of the projects and the preliminary budget that we are proposing. A total of $3,545,000 for fiscal year 2021-2022. And that's the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for that very informative presentation. I have a question on the communications tower. When you talk about the phase 4, completion and the final operational capability of the tower being in 2024, does that include all equipment that goes on the tower? That's all the communications equipment along with the tower itself and everything, right?
Correct.
Okay, because that's extremely important to the basin to have that resilient communication in place, and that's got to be a high priority. I have a question regarding the bank stabilization program. In previous board meetings, previous basin board meetings, we've heard from citizens talking about erosion of the sides of their banks. What contributes to a higher degree of erosion in some places versus others in our canals?
The canal system, obviously over time through major storms, that there's storm impacts and washing back and forth with the canal levels going up and down. When it dries out, it weakens the soils, and when the water comes back in, it loosens that weak soil and can move things around. And these canals were not were dug out as part of the proposed development back in the day. They were not really compacted well. So as a result, they do have a tendency to be worn down over time.
Mm-hmm. Is this the first time, to your knowledge, that we've formalized this bank stabilization program in the basin?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah,
we've done stretches previously, with the field station, as you saw on that one slide, and on the corkscrew area, and the field station does a very, very good job of responding to those types of needs. I believe Juan Bethencourt has presented previously on other areas that have been managed by the field station, but we're talking now in this case we're doing a more engineered stabilization project.
Well,
so
that
this will be.
it'll really be good for the citizens. I mean, this is great because they've been talking about some of these areas, and it'll help us get a visual on all of our canals and see what the state of the banks are. So excellent introduction of that program in a more stabilized, in a more formalized way. Let's see if we have any public comments on this item. Yvette, do we have any?
Madam Chair, I do not have any hands raised.
Okay, no hands raised on this item. Well, I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll go into number 11. This is our fiscal year 2021-2022 preliminary budget discussion, and that'll be with Candida Heater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Having a small difficulty here. If you just bear with me for a second. Ms. Heater, you do have control. Candy, can you hear? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
you're
you, Yvette.
welcome.
Appreciate it. Madam Chair, today's presentation is to discuss the fiscal year 2021-2022 preliminary budget. I'll go through the typical layout as a overview of the budget development milestones, and then we will get into the meat of the presentation, illustrating the current projected revenues at this point, as well as where the money may go for fiscal year 2021-2022, and then finalize with the next steps. So a brief overview of the budget development milestones, and the big takeaway from the budget development milestones is this discussion that we're having here today is by far not the last opportunity to discuss the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. We do have a almost full year of discussion. January being a milestone that is a statutorily driven milestone that the district must submit a budget, preliminary budget, to the legislature. And we will include the Big Cypress Basin's budget that we have here before you today in that report. February, come back to the Basin to discuss any changes. March and April, continue on with the review of the preliminary budget and any updates. July, another big month, as we all know, that is when taxable values come in from the county and all of the counties within the district's boundaries. And we would have, at that point in time, our proposed millage rate and tentative budget, and that is when you have your trued up final revenues for your ad valorem taxes. And then coming back to the Basin in August, as well as statutory deadline and requirement of submitting a tentative budget to the governor by August 1, and then coming back to the board, Basin board, for approval of the final millage rate and budget. So moving on to the revenues, a quick overview, you see that the adopted budget was $14,315,680 million for 2020-2021 that you adopted in August. And then the preliminary that you have before you today is $14,537,280 million. There's not a big swing in the revenues. They are pretty consistent with the balance of percentage of revenues that are projected to support the Basin's upcoming expenditures and requests. Moving on to a more detailed layout of the revenue sources as listed on the previous slide, with some comments that illustrate the reason in the change, which is the variance column of the preliminary 2021-2022 budget compared to the 2020-2021 adopted budget that we're in right now. So you see that the ad valorem taxes that we have before you today, we took a conservative estimate of leaving those revenues the same. We will, come back with more information once we're able to study from our economists with the state of Florida their recommended increases for Collier County for taxable values and new construction. And at that point in time, we'll have, a better estimate. And then, of course, as I had mentioned, July is when we'll have the actual values. The investment income, due to the way the environment is now with lower interest rates, we looked at our trends and our financials that we'll be going over later on in the meeting, and we noticed that we, needed to reduce the investment income to be conservative and to assure that we don't overextend the revenue that we think that we may make off of the basin's balances. So we did reduce those investment incomes down to $110,000, which is a $40,000, $345 reduction. Service center lease, that is up for expiration during the 2021 fiscal year, this year. And at this point in time, we went ahead and just made that adjustment, but do know that that will be coming back before you, Madam Chair, for further discussion later on in the year. And then changes in our fund balances with rebudgeted amounts of current year authority that we were proposing to carry over into the next year and rebudget for potential usage and reallocation. And bottom line, it is a $221,600 increase compared to the adopted budget at this moment. And we'll get into the uses to see where those increases are. So where the money goes, again, a balanced budget. You see your uses balance out to your revenues, so your adopted is the same amount as your adopted revenues, and the preliminary amounts balance out to the preliminary estimated revenues. Again, you see that not a big swift change and swing in the recommended or potential uses. And then the same layout, looking at the various categories that you saw on the previous slide with comments of why there is a variance. So noted, one of the larger increases is within the field equipment and fleet replacement. Right now, it's estimated maybe a potential $228,500 increase. Juan and his staff do have a 5-year plan where they look at the age of the fleet equipment as well as what the cost is, the maintenance cost. And within the fiscal year 2021-22 plan, there are a few items, a few fleet equipment items that range from 17 to 24 years of age. And not only the age of 17 to 24 years, but also the repair costs are starting to exceed a cost-effective measure, being, the reason why they're on the list for replacement. We did have a few small reductions within the service center as well as within one of our rebudgets from the prior year. So your operating expenses in your regional partnership illustrates a $351,600 increase. And then moving on to the next slide to net against that increase, which I will not repeat, as Kevin gave an excellent presentation and detailed presentation as to his requests to the Basin board for the preliminary budget. He illustrated the $3,545,000 request, and that is a $130,000 change reduction compared to the 2021 budget due to the various, schedule placements of many of these projects, where they are in their schedules, either finishing up or starting, etc. So for the next steps, requesting if there's any changes that we should incorporate, as well as the next steps, as I had mentioned earlier, submitting a January 15th budget to the legislature and the governor and DEP, and then reporting back to the Basin board over the upcoming months with more accurate revenue projections, expenditure requests. Lisa, your Basin administrator, will continue to work with the budget team as well as Basin staff and district staff on, truing up requests and needs within the Basin budget. And we then will come to the Basin board with those changes and those refined changes for discussion.
Well,
And
thank
Madam
you.
Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you. Sorry.
That's not a problem at all. Thank you, Candy. I really appreciate the informative report on the initial numbers. I think that the reduction in the investment income is reasonable. I know that in previous Basin board meetings, I've asked you about what indications you have from the economists that work with the district on any crystal ball predictions. I don't know if you have any of that information to look at where we might be headed. But as we move forward, I'd like you to continue to look at that in terms of advising the board on any adjustments that we need to make. Hopefully we won't have to make many, but certainly we want to factor that in if necessary.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I do have a report in front of me that I did pull off of EDR's website. And it is slightly, I don't want to say outdated, but it they typically, as I've mentioned in the past, that they provide updates in the November-December timeframe. But they did do an estimate in the August timeframe, and they did compare their impacts of COVID to taxable values being commercial, non-commercial, residential, homesteaded, non-homesteaded, etc. To their January estimates for 20, their 20 January estimates, comparing then what they thought in August. And, Collier County is looking fairly, good compared to many of the other counties throughout the state of Florida. Collier County for 20 had a 6% increase, in the values. And right now the economists are saying that there may be about a 3% increase. So about half of a taxable value, increase within the area. But as you requested, and I will duly noted and do continue to watch those and then come back with a better, recommendation as more information does become available to us, Madam Chair.
I appreciate that, Candy, and I really appreciate the positive working relationship and support that you provide to the Basin. I know that it takes a whole team to work on the budgets, and it's no easy task. So I appreciate everything that you do for us. Yvette, is there any members of the public who would like to speak on this item?
No, Madam Chair, I have no hands raised.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Candy. I appreciate it, and we'll see how the next review of the budget goes. I don't have any board comments at this point. I'll save them to the end. So we'll go into the technical reports. The first report is by the field station, and that's Juan Bethencourt, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and everyone.
Good afternoon.
Again, my name is Juan Bethencourt. I'm the BCB Field Station Superintendent, and I will be reporting on the field station activities. I will be talking about rainy season activities, our canal maintenance, on the vegetation removal that we're doing throughout the canals, canal debris, structure painting and cleanup, structures mechanical repairs. I'll be briefing on the tree removal project, on the structures inspection program, SIP, and of course, our 3-month outlook. On this slide, I want to show some of the canal repairs which we have been working on. Specifically, this is on the Corkscrew Canal. And I'm showing some before and after pictures of some of the erosion that we had to take care of after a rainy event. The picture on the left, it shows the before. The picture on the right shows the after work being done by the field station personnel. On this slide shows more repairs being done on the canals. And this is specifically is on the 951 canal bank, some washouts that we had to take care of. And again, some before and after pictures. This here is the Faka Canal. We had to clear the right of way for some of the Brazilian pepper bushes growing wildly around the right of way. And again, you can see some before and after pictures. This here is the Faka Canal, and this is and some of the vegetation that we took out of the tough booms. And again, you see some before and after pictures, and you see the arrow showing some of the vegetation against the weed barrier. Some of the debris that were taken out from some of the canals on this specific slide is at the airport canal that we took some PVC pipes that we found in the bottom of the canal, and they were removed. And then again, some before and after pictures. On this slide, during this period, we've been trying to do some beautification or on some of our structures. This is on GG2. You can see some before and after pictures of all the components on our structures, which we have been pressure washed and painted. Here, what I want to show is on the Curry 1 structure, some mechanical repairs that we have been working on. This was part of the structure inspection program. And here you can see some lube oil line replacement to the gearboxes. And again, some pictures of the before and after. On slide 10, 11, and 12, I want to show some pictures taken during the tree removal project from GG1 to Airport Road. I'm happy to inform that the project was successfully completed and within the allotted time. And again, you see some of the undertake for the equipment that was used for the removal of trees during that project. Again, you can see some before and after pictures. The picture on the left shows a big ficus by the Spanky restaurant. And then you can see the after picture after the tree has been removed. On this slide, I want to show some of the beautification that we had to do on a property from which we had to remove another huge ficus tree. And then you can see the equipment being used and the amount of resources that we use for that. Again, some before and after pictures. On this slide, I want to show some of the accomplishments that we have done for the structure inspection program, which basically helps identify issues with our buildings and structures throughout the BCB AOR. We've been doing lots of work since 2019. We concentrated efforts and resources as much as we were able to. And from fiscal year 2019, from which we had 392 issues, last year we found only 105. And from there, for this upcoming fiscal year, we only have 9 issues that we have to take care of. I'm pleased to say this has been one of the greatest accomplishments achieved by our field station personnel, and by working as a team and concentrating on the task, we're making our structures better and more reliable. And of course, for the 3-month outlook, we are going to concentrate on mechanical harvesting and vegetation management along our canal banks and cleaning up of weed barriers. We will continue supporting verbal operational orders, AVOs, throughout the wet season as requested by water managers, which basically are the orders given by the water managers to make gate adjustments on our structures for flow control and for pumping operations, as well as for manual staff gauging readings as required. We will continue repairing and cleaning up canals as needed. And of course, we're concentrating, and we will continue concentrating on the beautification of our structures by pressure washing and painting the different components. And with that, that's all I have for you this time around, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Juan, for the excellent presentation, and also for the excellent work that you and the team at the field station are doing. It's clear by those before and after pictures how important the work is that you do to maintain the canals. And I saw that firsthand when I visited the tree removal project on the Golden Gate 1 main canal, and I was very impressed with the care and concern that was being taken for the neighbors. I was on the boat when we talked to some of the neighbors, and to see the work that was being done and see the collaboration between Rich, the head of operations for the entire district, and his team, and you and the Basin administrator and her team. So I want to commend you for the work that you are doing to address many of the long overdue issues that we've had in the canal. So thank you for that. Yvette, do we have any raised hands from the public for this agenda item?
None, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that then we'll move on to the water conditions report. Brad Jackson.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Brad Jackson, a basin engineer for Big Cypress Basin, and it's always a pleasure to present the water conditions report since our last board meeting back in August. So given that, I can kind of just get started here and kind of give an overview of the rainfall of where we've been, and kind of give a snapshot of the strategy of how we've operated the system and some events that we've had come through the area as well. So I'll just get started here. So kind of our 2020 summary, how much rain have we got so far? How are we doing? Well, here we're doing basically right at average. 97% of normal. We had an extremely dry spring, especially in March. We had kind of a lackluster performance in the middle of wet season with a little bit lower than averaged, but we definitely made up for it in September, October, November. So far we've definitely made up for it. So given that, we're in good shape looking forward to dry season. And now I'll start to kind of highlight on a couple areas, a couple of systems that came through that are noteworthy since our last board meeting. And I'll start here with Tropical Storm Sally. It feels like forever ago now, but this came through September 12th and 13th. It formed just off the Florida coast, and then came through the district and the basin the following day. So overall, this system was it was a little bit of a rainmaker for portions of the system. There were some areas you can see on the right, just south of our Henderson Creek watershed. You had some local maxima of 11 inches of rain, and there was definitely a line. If you were west of it, you got a pretty good soaking. If you're east of it, not as much so much. So that kind of starts down here at Faka Union, and then kind of went northwest and cut through the basin. Overall, the system responded well to that. For some reason, these always seem to come through on the weekend. So I had to ask the field station to get out of bed early and start making some operational changes to the system so we can, continue to provide the flood control for the residents of the county here. But overall, the Basin primary canal system handled the system well. We didn't have any out of bank concerns or issues. The system handled the rainfall very well. So I'll fast forward a couple months. This one's a little bit fresher in at least my mind. Tropical Storm Eta. It had a very interesting path. It came in down here in Nicaragua and then kind of made a bunch of U-turns and zigs and zags through the Caribbean and Gulf. So we had really almost two different types of impacts from this one. Our initial impact was here as it cut across the Keys, and we had a couple days of heavy rain in the area, and then it kind of went out, made a U-turn in the Gulf, and then we had a second day of impacts, or I won't say impacts, but of rainfall a couple days later when it was a Cat 1 hurricane 100 miles or so offshore. So the rainfall from this storm, at least for the basin, given the time of year that it happened, I was almost look at it as more beneficial. You can kind of, this is the rainfall on the right side of the screen that occurred over the basin. There's big swaths of the 3 to 4 inch that I'm circling. So that was kind of the average that we saw on this side of the district. Other areas, obviously, as we've all seen, has been, they got a lot more rainfall in the conservation areas and on the East Coast and kind of north of us as well, upwards of 10.5 inches. We were fortunate. We did not get that type of impact here. I would note that that's not that far away from here. So we were prepared to accept that type of rainfall and respond as needed. Fortunately, we didn't have that rainfall here, and it really just topped up our surface waters and our canal levels to get us in a good spot as we move into dry season. So now I'll kind of back up, move into kind of a monthly summary real quick of where the rain fell. I won't spend too much time on these, but on September, obviously the big story there was from Tropical Storm Sally. So as you would expect, the rainfall patterns there kind of followed the patterns from Sally, with the rainfall falling on the western half of the basin. It was above average, but thankfully we're nowhere near where we were in 2017. We had almost 20 inches of rain, and fortunately nowhere near where we were in 2019 when we only had roughly 2 inches of rain. So good spot there for us. Move forward a month to October. This was a pretty typical month. The wet season came to a close towards the end of the month as it kind of fizzled out this time, rather than someone turning off the faucet. So that was, it went a little bit longer than it typically does. It was closer towards the end of the month when the daily thunderstorm activity came off, but we ended the month at around 4.5 inches, far cry from our 1995 high of 13.5 inches. So overall, another good month there. This is November so far. as of the 16th. Most of this rain that fell is obviously from Tropical Storm Eta that came through. It has been fairly dry with the exception of that storm for this month. This outlier here in the northeast portion of the basin definitely got the most rainfall from the storm. I'm sorry. It is a wet month, but it's not, again, it's not record breaking for us, but I know it's up there in terms of, I think it's the third or fourth wettest November we've had. So I've kind of walked through each month and just let's talk a little bit about the water year. It starts on May 1st, runs through the following April, and kind of look at this as how much water we have to get us through the drier portions of the month. So I kind of already indicated that the middle part of the wet season was drier than normal, and we made up for it nicely on the tail end of the wet season. So now that hopefully the majority of the rainfall is behind us, we'll see a little bit lower in the 1.5 to 2 inch average per month going forward. If we continue that trend, you can look here on the right. We were at about 103% of average. So you can't really look better. As if you were going to have an average year, we're about as close as you can get to it in the basin, at least. So we're coming in just short or just over 47 inches so far. So that's kind of the how much rain we got, and now how much water did we discharge during that time out to the tide from our coastal structures. So just to highlight here, GG1, this is how much water was moved from the system out to tide, and it was about 116,000 acre feet. To give that number a little bit of context in terms of history, these are directly related to the amount of rain that falls on the system, obviously. And so in a normal year, this number is about 118 for this time of year. So if it were an average year, you'd have 118,000 acre feet discharge here. So this lines up that we're pretty much, this makes sense. It checks with how much rain we've had. I would note, I've mentioned in previous board meetings, S488, our Picayune pump station that's active and pumping restoration flows, has been, the rainfall hasn't hit there as of our previous board meetings. It's finally caught up. It's got in the game a little bit, and it's actually surpassed. You see, we've discharged 23,500 acre feet. Compare that with our Henderson Creek watershed and our Cocohatchee watershed, and it's actually a bigger contender than the other two. So, that was our kind of water year. Now I'm just going to give a quick snapshot in time of the conditions of the system as they look today, or as of the 16th, I should say. So like I mentioned before, Tropical Storm Eta topped us off. And if you're looking at this map, everything's here in the black. And that means that we've got water levels above the 90th percentile for this time of year. If it were, a wet season, that might look more concerning, as it is, since we're right in the cusp of dry season, where the strategy here is to hold as much water as we can in the system and use every tool we have in our toolbox to, hold the water inside the superficial aquifer and on the ground surface as the rainfall does subside. So overall, again, we're in good shape moving forward, and Eta really topped everything off and brought us back up to this 90th percentile range. So I'll just kind of walk through the system and kind of show you the track of where our levels have been throughout the year so far, and kind of you can see the daily operations that we need to do in order to maintain flood control or conserve water, or both, on each of these systems. So starting back here in September, you can see the lowering for each of the tropical storms that come through. This lowering here is from Sally, and then a brief lowering here for Tropical Storm Eta. We were running the very top of range for a dry season, which is this kind of orange box, is where we want to keep the water level when it's a dry condition and when we're not getting a lot of rainfall. We want to lower it to the blue box if we're anticipating, heavy rainfall or some sort of tropical storm event. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the green band is kind of where we are in the normal range. So out of the period of record for this particular site, most of the time the low water levels are in the green band. I'd like to highlight some of the ways we're able to keep these water levels higher is because of some of the capital improvement projects we've been doing and the remote monitoring improvements that Kevin alluded to earlier. So it's really giving us more tools in our toolbox to manage the water more efficiently and better. So moving up to GG4, about halfway up the system, the story kind of rings true here. We're maintaining in our dry season levels, and you see this small blip in the radar here for when we did some minor operations for or minor changes for Tropical Storm Eta. Moving up to Cocohatchee, similar story here. We're keeping it just as high as we can. We're well above the 90th percentile for this particular structure as well, conserving water. Moving up slightly to Coco 3, this structure has, or this particular site has a pretty good swing from wet season to dry season. In dry season, we could be down here near 8, and right now, we're near 12.5, 12.2, trying to hold as much water as we can. This particular site is connected to the Corkscrew Swamp, and so we want to be able to hold that as high as we can in order to keep that hydrated as long as possible, with using every tool that we have at least. Moving then to the southeast, we've got Faka Union number 1. This structure is just a very simple structure. If the blue line is above the brown line, we're discharging water to tide. If it's below it, we're not discharging. So here you can see the 2 spikes from the 2 tropical storms I mentioned, and it spiked up and it's recovering down to a more typical range for this time of year. Moving up, this is about halfway up the Faka Union system. I've highlighted this one in the past. The kind of takeaway here is I wanted to compare and contrast with 2019, which is the kind of dashed purple line, versus 2020, which is the blue line. I've done this previously this year, but last year we had a record-breaking dry September, and this year we did not. So we are doing substantially better as far as water levels in that stretch, in an effort to keep that level high as we can, so we're not, down here in the drought condition when the dry season comes to a close. So always looking forward as well, instead of just at the storms in front of us. Moving up to Faka Union number 5, this is our next structure upstream from FU4. Again, just repeating the same pattern as before, trying to conserve water as much as possible without overtaxing the flood control system and releasing too much water out of it. Moving down to Henderson Creek 1, this one is a little interesting. This spike right here is from Tropical Storm Sally. This is a manual structure, or partially manual structure. So I had the field station. I've asked them to go out and make all the AVOs, the gate operations that JJ mentioned. So they were out there making gate operations so we can get the stage back into its normal range. I would note that just because we were above the blue line doesn't mean anything bad is happening. That's actually our normal range for dry season. So I think that's important to note, that we weren't really out of bank or anything. We didn't have widespread flooding or anything there. So looking good. Everything's recovered nicely. And then HC2, moving up that system, like some of our other sites, this one has a large swing as well from wet to dry season. This structure is not operated very often. I think this year it was only operated once in response to Tropical Storm Sally, which is here, and it kind of recedes on its own. So we try and do everything we can to keep water in it, but sometimes we just don't have the ability to do that with the infrastructure we have. So I mentioned S488, our merit pump station, earlier, and just wanted to highlight here, we did move this into dry season, and it did have a slow start to how much water we were pumping for restoration flows. So, but we did move the levels back up into dry season range, as the conditions warranted. And so you kind of have to tell how much water. You can't tell everything just from the stage on that particular site. So I like to show how much water we actually pumped. And the blue line, you can see all summer we were kind of dragging the bottom from where we've done historically, and we finally ramped up as the tropical storms, and we got a surplus of rain back. I would note here, we're actually pumping more water at this time of year than we have in the past. Not to say that we're anywhere near the maximum capacity of the site at all, which occurred back here in Hurricane Irma 2017. But overall, it's looking good for dry season. So we've I spent some time looking at the rain and the surface water levels. I'm going to take a quick look at the groundwater trends. For the area, there's a handful of sites that we report on, and the takeaway here is that water levels are much better now than they were earlier in the wet season, when July, when we were setting, some of the sites were near lows, record lows, and especially much better than they were in April and May. So at this point, all levels are higher than the green, the green band, and above the 75th percentile for this time of year. So we're in good shape again, and as we move out of our wet pattern into a drier pattern. So I've talked a little bit about how we had the water conservation kind of mode come in a little bit quickly, maybe earlier than normal for this, given the forecast. And the forecast we had, there's actually a strengthening La Nina in the Pacific that has an impact on South Florida's climate. The long-term forecasts, and normally there's not a lot of, put too much stock in these because they change, but these have been pretty, they haven't changed much, and the forecasters seem pretty confident that we're going to have a below average dry season in terms of rainfall. It doesn't mean it won't rain at all. It just means that, statistically speaking, we'll be probably below normal. So that's another reason we're trying to hold things as high as we can within the system. And then I'm gonna close here on my favorite slide, because there's no rainfall on it really to speak of. It's been a busy few weeks for everyone here in terms of tropical storm response. We had a cold front move through. So we do have a drier pattern finally establishing. So this is my favorite slide to show here. I would note the tropics are still going, but there's no forecasted impacts or anything to South Florida at this time. And they're kind of expecting it to stay that way. Let's hope it does. And with that, I will be glad to answer any questions.
Yvette, are there any raised hands from the public for this agenda item?
Madam Chair, I have one, Brad Cornell.
Okay, great.
Hey, it's Brad Cornell with Audubon again. Brad Jackson, thank you very much for that report. It's very helpful. I just had one quick request. When I'm looking at your data for canal stages, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a hydrologist. So to me, it would be helpful to see where the ground level was, or the bottom of the canal was in those stage graphs. It wasn't easy to see when water went below ground level or went below the bottom of the canal. And it seems like, especially since we're really concerned, as you just pointed out, with winter dry season concerns about the integrity of our wetland systems in the dry season, that's really important for all of us to kind of pay attention to. So thanks a lot for that. Appreciate the report.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to speak, Yvette?
Madam Chair, I have no additional hands raised.
Thank you. And thank you, Brad, for an excellent report. And I thought that was a good suggestion that Brad made. Let's take it under consideration and see what we can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is the Basin Administrator's Report. Lisa Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing I have to talk about is our future meeting dates. So this concludes our last meeting for this calendar year. So we're looking forward into our 2021 calendar year. And in your packet, you received our future meeting dates. And we will be posting those to the public for everybody to add to their calendar, so they can make sure they join us for all of our meetings next year.
Well, that's great.
Secondly, good. Secondly, I really just want to take a moment and thank Brad and JJ and the field station. They both talked about the efforts in dealing with Tropical Storm Sally and then Ada. But what I think a lot of folks don't realize is how much work goes into that, whether we're receiving 2 or 3 inches of rainfall, or in the years in the past where we've gotten a huge amount. That planning and preparation for those storms are enormous. And I really just want to say thank you to the team. They did an awesome job this wet season, and everybody should be very, very proud. It was a great year.
Thank you for that. And I echo those comments 100%. I mean, just when you get the canal level set up as if you're approaching dry season, then you get a tropical storm and everybody has to react. And it's no easy task. Some of the canals have to be changed manually. So that means that Juan's guys are going to have to go out there. And plus, it's a big responsibility. You're responsible for flood protection, water supply, all sorts of things there that are critical to people's quality of life and the natural systems as well. So hats off to them as well, Lisa. That's great. And you too, because I know you're coordinating a lot of balls when that's going on as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll move on to the monthly financial report with Candy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The monthly financial report is through the month of September 30th, 2020, so the end of your fiscal year 2020. And I will say and provide to you in my report that you all ended the fiscal year very positive in your revenue collections, as well as how you obligated your funding, how staff obligated funding. So taxes, ad valorem taxes, you collected $63,708 more than what we had budgeted at the 96%. We budgeted $10.6 million and we collected $10.7 million. So you gained a little bit of extra revenue there. So that is positive. Also, as I'd mentioned in many of my other reports, the FEMA funding for Hurricane Irma was posted. We received that money, and that was about $3,250,172. Then your investment earnings. We almost collected all of our investment earnings. We were $47 shy of collecting our investment earnings. And what we saw was that we were running at the beginning of the fiscal year an average of about $23,000 per month. And then starting after, the pandemic hit and the market started, changing, we went down to about a $10,000 per month of investment earnings. So that is why we, as in my previous discussion, we thought that we should, decrease the potential earnings coming in 2022. With that said, again, you collected $3.3 million above your operating revenues that were budgeted, and obligated, you were 82% obligated. You would never fully be obligated because you have your $2 million emergency reserves that was not used. So that is illustrated as a part of your available balance, as well as savings that your staff always look for throughout the year with contracting as well as operational costs. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Candy. And you're getting me very accustomed to positive news when it comes to our budget. So I hope you'll keep it up. I'm sure there'll come a day where maybe it won't be so positive, but until then, I'm going to enjoy your reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is general public comments. This is for members of the public who would like to speak on any topic. I think that you're very familiar with, if you're participating on Zoom, please raise your hand. Or if you're using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Yvette, are there any members of the public who would like to speak? And we'll give a couple of seconds here in case someone is slow to raise their hand.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Mike Elfenbein.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to say I've been listening all day as I work, and I wanted to take an opportunity to say that, Madam Chairwoman, you have some exemplary leadership in Lisa Keeler. I've had an opportunity to work with her over the last several months, and she's amazing to work with, and she sets an example for how a government agency responsible for so many resources should be modeled. I just wanted you to know that she's appreciated, her staff is appreciated, and thank you guys for all your hard work and the dedication that you put into these issues.
Thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. And I feel the same way. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you both. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, I have no additional hands raised.
Okay, we'll give a couple seconds there, Yvette. If there's no others, then we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, having no other general public comments, I'd like to thank everyone on the staff and in the basin that participated and prepared the presentations for today's meeting. I know it's gone a little longer than usual, but that's because there's a lot going on in the basin, and without the teamwork between the district staff, the basin staff, and everyone working together, this would not be possible. And the level of professional, informative presentations today and the discussion and the public's participation today made this meeting extremely, extremely informative and valuable. So I want to thank all of you for your hard work in putting all of those presentations together and having the dialogue with the public in such an open and transparent way. And as you can see, the basin has a lot going on. And without your support and without the teamwork, it wouldn't be possible for us to move some of these initiatives forward. So thank you very much for that. And with that, our next Basin Board meeting will be scheduled for February 25th, 2021. And I'd like to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.